Chapter 678. Rebirth Level Cultivator? There was a Samsara Realm cultivator in the Hongchen sect? Mu Hongchen's words were like a bomb that exploded everything in an instant. The expressions of all the cultivators at the round table changed. As far as they knew, there was not a single Rebirth Realm cultivator in the entire Chun Luo 7 Stars world. In the Dun Luo 7-star world, there had once been a Reincarnation Realm cultivator. They were the founder of the Yuchi sect, the Black and White Demon King, but they had already fallen. Since then, 4 millions of years, no one in the Chun Luo 7-star world was able to reach the rebirth state. Whether it was the Hong Chun sect or the Yuchi sect, as long as a Rebirth Realm cultivator appeared, the balance of power would definitely be broken. One person entering the cycle of reincarnation could definitely destroy a sect. Samsara was the absolute king of the Dustnet 7-star realm. There was no doubt about that. However, in both the Red Dust sect and the Winged Puppet sect, the two cultivators with the highest realm were the current sect masters of the two sections. The sect master of the Red Dust sect, Mu Hongchen, had been at the peak immortal realm in one lifetime. The sect master of the Flying Plume sect, Su Zixio, had been at the late immortal realm in one lifetime. These two people had the highest possibility of breaking through to the rebirth state. However, in their eyes, even Mu Hongchen was still far from reaching the rebirth state. Red Dust, Imperishable, Samsara, and Lotus Transformation were the 4 major stages of a Tibetan cultivator's cultivation. Among them, one lifetime immortality was the highest realm of immortality. Only after reaching the sempiternal realm would one be able to reach the Samsara realm. However, before a Yizong cultivator's one-life rebirth realm, there was still the 5 declines realm. In theory, no matter if it was Mu Hongchen or Su Zixio, they would have to go through the 5 declines before they could enter the cycle of reincarnation. It could be said that the 5 blight realm was the great tribulation of life and death for many Yizong cultivators. The number of cultivators who had gone through the 5 blights and cultivated to the samsara fruit was less than 1/10 that of a cultivator at the consummate immortal realm. One must know that cultivators who were able to cultivate all the way to sempiternal realm consummation were all exceptionally talented individuals. However, most of them couldn't get past the 5 signs of decline. Therefore, it was impossible for the Red Dust sect to have a reincarnation realm cultivator. Even if Mu Hongchen could make a breakthrough, it would take a long time. However, everyone understood that Mu Hongchen wouldn't speak carelessly. For a moment, everyone couldn't help but look at Sumo. Sumo, could she be a rebirth state cultivator? This was especially so for Zheningbu. He had experienced everything with Sumo before and felt that this was very likely. That was because Sumo's combat strength and spells were extremely unique. Sumo, have you been seen through? Yi Wuhui couldn't help but laugh in her mind. Mu Hongchen is looking at you when he's talking. Impossible. Sumo laughed in her heart. Only an Exalt Realm expert would be able to see through me. If she was at the Exalt Realm, then there would be no need for her to make everything so complicated. Then who could it be? Asked Yi Wuhui. I haven't seen any reincarnation realm cultivators in the Red Dust sect. Hee. Sumo smiled. Currently, there shouldn't be any reincarnation realm cultivators in the Red Dust sect, but there might be one soon. Mu Hongchen? Yi Wuhui guessed. Yes. Sumo nodded in her heart. Because, you should know, the reincarnators of the 3 realms don't actually have the 5 decrepit realms. Therefore, she is the only one in the Red Dust sect who can quickly reach the reincarnation realm. Sumo and Yi Wuhui were conversing in the sea of consciousness, so no one else knew. At this moment, everyone was still looking at Sumo. Brother Murong, could it be that you? Zheningbu looked at Sumo and hesitated. Hee. Sumo's expression was calm, but there was a hint of guilt in it. Patrol Guard Zhen, please don't misunderstand. How can I be a reincarnation realm cultivator? However, I have to congratulate sect leader Mu. As she spoke, Sumo cupped her hands towards Mu Hongqin. Congratulations, sect leader Mu, on reaching the reincarnation realm. Hua, sect leader? All the red dust sect cultivators present were stunned and turned to look at Mu Hongqin. Sect leader? Jian Shiyong felt that it was unbelievable and looked at Mu Hongqin excitedly. If Mu Hongqin reached the reincarnation realm, then the so-called war with the Yuchi sect was naturally not worth discussing. Discuss what? Just start the war directly. Sect leader. Zhuang Xingzi also couldn't believe it. The other 4 patrol guards looked at Mu Hongqin expectantly. They all wanted to hear an affirmative answer from Mu Hongqin. However, Mu Hongqin's expression was calm as he smiled at Sumo fellow cultivator Murong. How did you manage to tell? Hua, when Jian Shiyong and the rest heard this sentence was equivalent to admitting what Sumo said. Congratulations, sect leader, on reaching the reincarnation realm. Congratulations, sect leader. Congratulations, Red Dust Sect. In an instant, the 2 Star Town elders and the 4 patrol guards all left their seats and knelt on the ground, sincerely congratulating. Sumo also left her seat and bowed slightly. In the entire hall, only the 2 maids standing in the corner did not move. Their expressions were as calm as water, as if they heard nothing. Get up. Mu Hongqin waved his hand lightly. A strong force made Jian Shiyong and the rest involuntarily stand up and return to their original positions. Don't celebrate too early. I am actually still a little bit away from the reincarnation realm. However, this little bit of distance is not a problem at all. I have absolute confidence that I will definitely reach the reincarnation realm. However, I still need a little more time. Sect leader. Jian Shiyong hurriedly said, Don't worry. Whether it is 100 years or 1,000 years, as long as you reach the reincarnation realm, we can attack the Yuchi sect. The long-cherished wish of the Red Dust sect will definitely be achieved. Sect leader, during this period of time, we can mobilize the fleet and let the Star Lords of the 4 major stars prepare for the decisive battle. Zhuang Xingzi also said. The other 4 patrol guards were also eager to try. 100 years or 1,000 years was really nothing to them. Once Mu Hongqin stepped into the reincarnation realm, it would be the day of the Yuchi sect's destruction. In their opinion, the little time that Mu Hongqin mentioned was equivalent to 100 years. This time was just the right time to prepare for a full-scale battle. However, they did not expect Mu Hongqin to lightly sneer. 100 years? 1,000 years? Everyone, I am afraid that is enough time for the Red Dust sect to patrol the entire Dead Soul Star field. What? The cultivators of the Red Dust sect were stunned again. Mu Hongqin today had given them too many surprises. Sect leader, you mean that it will not take 100 years to reach the reincarnation realm? Jian Shiyong asked tentatively. Mu Hongqin nodded and then raised 3 fingers. 30 years? Jian Shiyong's eyes lit up. That was indeed beyond his expectations. However, he did not expect Mu Hongqin to shake his head. 3 years? Zhuang Xingzi's eyes were filled with shock. However, Mu Hongqin still shook his head. 3 months. Jian Shiyong and Zhuang Xingzi almost could not sit still. If that was really the case, then they needed to immediately mobilize all the forces of the Red Dust sect. However, Mu Hongqin still shook his head. 3 months is not enough. I only need 3 days. 3 days. The cultivators of the Red Dust sect were all shocked. 3 days? Jian Shiyong and Zhuang Xingzi could not help but look at each other. At this time, they could immediately order the stars to prepare for war. The 4 patrol guards also looked at each other. Each of them had a large number of troops, but it would take more than 3 days to assemble the battleships. 3 days? Even Su Mo's heart trembled at this number. Unless Mu Hongqin suddenly awakened, it was impossible for him to reach the rebirth realm in 3 days. Mu Hongqin smiled faintly. Actually, it would take a little longer. However, I did not expect. Mu Hongchen paused slightly, then looked at Sumo, his eyes instantly turning cold. I did not expect that fellow Taoist Murong would come. Whoosh, as he spoke, Mu Hongchen suddenly flew up. A ray of red light with thousands of murderous aura headed straight for Sumo. Chapter 679. Hongmen Palace, a banquet. Regarding this banquet, Su Mo had actually been mentally prepared. However, he didn't expect that Mu Hongchen would suddenly attack him without any warning. Not only Sumo, but all the cultivators from the Red Dust sect also did not expect this to happen. After all, Sumo was their guest. Whoosh, in an instant the sky was filled with red light. A cultivator at the Immortal Perfection stage was the absolute king in the Dun Luo 7 Stars world. At that moment, all the cultivators from the Red Dust sect were shocked by the pressure. Jian Shiyong and Zhuang Xingzi, the two elders of the Star Town, did not react in time. Bang, bang, bang. The two Star Town elders and the 4 patrol envoys were sent flying by the shockwave. None of them could stop Mu Hongchen. They definitely did not dare to stop Mu Hongchen. Mu Hongchen formed a claw with one hand and grabbed at Sumo's throat. There was almost no distance between the two. This sudden change was out of everyone's expectations. Moreover, Mu Hongchen did not hold back at all. This time, he wanted to kill Sumo. Whoosh, all the furnishings in the hall were instantly destroyed. However, Sumo was Sumo. It was impossible for Mu Hongchen to kill him. Boom, crack, Sumo's eyebrows twitched. At the same time, his body was sent flying by Mu Hongchen's power. Actually, Sumo did not need to dodge. As long as he dispersed his rebirth level pressure, he would be able to send Mu Hongchen flying. However, he did not do that, because that would hurt Mu Hongchen. Sumo retreated quickly. His speed was much faster than Mu Hongchen's. He retreated to a jade pillar in the hall. Then, he waved his hand and a black shield appeared in front of him. Mu Hongchen's eyes lit up instantly when he saw that spiritual art, because that once again confirmed her judgment. At the same time, her hand grabbed the shield. Boom, crack, Sumo's technique was very unique. Not only was Mu Hongchen's energy dissipated by the shield, but a large portion of it was also transferred to the jade pillar behind him. In an instant, the jade pillar shattered, and the cyclone dispersed. Mu Hongchen stood 7 feet away from him, her red robes fluttering in the wind. Sect Master! Jian Shiyong and the rest instantly stood behind Mu Hongchen, their faces filled with astonishment. Zheningbu's face was filled with embarrassment and confusion. After all, Sumo was a guest he had brought back. Sect Leader Mu? Sumo looked at Mu Hongchen and said coldly, "Could it be that this is how the Red Dust sect treats its guests?" Haha. Mu Hongchen laughed coldly. "Fellow cultivator Murong, you're indeed skilled. May I ask, fellow Taoist Murong, where are you from?" "Oh." Sumo frowned. "Sovereign Mu, what do you mean by that? What do you mean?" Mu Hongchen shook his head. "Fellow Taoist Murong, I'm afraid that your realm is far beyond the first life immortal early stage, right? Just now, even a first life immortal early stage cultivator might not have been able to dispel my attack as easily as you did." "Ha ha!" Sumo laughed coldly. "Luckily, I'm not a first life immortal early stage cultivator. Otherwise, I would have died under Sovereign Mu's spell. Not a first life immortal early stage cultivator?" The Red Dust sect cultivators all frowned. It was not surprising that many cultivators liked to hide their cultivation when they traveled the infinite realms. However, under normal circumstances, it was very difficult for cultivators of the same level to hide their cultivation, unless one had a special artifact or spell. Jian Shiyong didn't notice anything unusual when he first met Sumo. Zhuang Xingzi, who had been accompanying Sumo the entire time, also didn't notice anything unusual. If it was a cultivator of the same level, it would definitely not be easy to hide their cultivation in front of them. Could it be that Sumo was in the 5 blight stage? However, the 5 blight stage was a huge tribulation for first life immortal early stage cultivators. Most first life immortal early stage cultivators would try their best to hide themselves when they were going through the 5 blight stage. They might even transform into immortal for tens of thousands of years. How could anyone go through the 5 blight stage openly? Usually, it was not easy to find a real 5 blight stage cultivator in the infinite realms. Fellow cultivator Murong, what is your purpose in coming to my red dust sect? Mu Hongchen asked. What purpose? Sumo smiled helplessly. He really wanted to say that his purpose in coming here was for her. However, Mu Hongchen didn't know him at all. Sigh. Yi Wuhui let out a long sigh in his sea of consciousness. The gentleman knows the gentleman, but the gentleman doesn't know the gentleman. It was indeed a kind of pain. I don't have any purpose. Sumo paused. However, I really want to resolve the enmity between the Red Dust sect and the Yuchi sect. Why? The Red Dust sect and the Yuchi sect have been fighting for millions of years. Among the Chun Luo 7 stars, there can only be one super sect left. Why do you want to resolve the enmity between us? Mu Hongchen's tone was aggressive. Why? You must know, Sumo said slowly. But I can tell you why now. Why? Mu Hongchen narrowed his eyes. Because you may be from the same sect. You and the Black and White Demon King are from the same world, Sumo said. Mu Hongchen couldn't help but mock Sumo after listening to her words. Fellow cultivator Murong, you're right. Actually, I don't just come from the same world as the Black and White Demon King. Don't I also come from the same world as you, fellow cultivator Murong? Huh. Sumo was stunned. She remembered? Yi Wuhui asked suspiciously. Aren't we both from the same world? Mu Hongchen changed the topic and sneered. Murong Huang, I heard that you have the spells of the Red Dust sect and the Yuchi sect. I didn't believe it before, but the spell you used just now was very special. That's the Tai Wang technique. Sumo looked at Mu Hongchen. He really wanted to see a trace of emotion in Mu Hongchen's eyes. However, he didn't see what he wanted to see. Tai Wang technique? Mu Hongchen's eyes narrowed slightly and the corner of his mouth curled. Is that the name you gave it? In the Dust Sift 7-star realm, we call it the Demon Moon Demonic Technique. Demon Moon Demonic Technique? Jian Shiyong and the others' expressions changed when they heard Mu Hongchen's words. They seemed to understand why Mu Hongchen would attack Sumo. People from the Demon Moon world. At this moment, the way they looked at Sumo was completely different. Demon Moon? Sumo was also stunned. The Demon Moon world still exists? Of course. Mu Hongchen sneered. Why do you ask when you already know the answer? Compared to the Demon Moon, we might be more willing to coexist with the Yuchi sect. Fellow cultivator Murong, you have the Demon Moon demonic technique and chose that Plum Blossom magic staff? You should know that that magic staff belongs to the Demon Moon, right? Jian Shiyong and the others' expressions changed completely. The Demon Moon was the overlord of the entire Dead Souls star field. It had always sought to unify the Dead Souls. Legend had it that the Demon Moon world had real Samsara-level cultivators. However, the Demon Moon world and the Dust Sift 7-star realm were at opposite ends of the Dead Souls star field. Unexpectedly, the power of the Demon Moon had penetrated into the Dust Sift 7-star realm. Sumo, it seems that your speculation is completely correct. Yi Wuhui said, we were indeed brought to the past by the immeasurable ship. Now, the Demon Moon world has not perished yet. That interstellar war has not broken out yet. It seems so. Sumo's expression sank slightly. Why did Mu Hongchen say that she was a cultivator of the Demon Moon? Set up the array. Kill. At this moment, Mu Hongchen had already given the order. At the same time, she spread her hands behind her back and instantly propped up a red light curtain. On one side of the light curtain were all the cultivators of the mortal world, and on the other side was Sumo. Boom, boom, instantly, the entire Hongmen Palace was filled with loud noises. This Hongmen Palace was actually a big killing array. Chapter 680. One Palace as a Formation. One had to admit that Mu Hongqin had prepared a huge gift for Suimo. Even Jian Shiyong and Zhuang Xingzi did not expect Mu Hongqin to use the Hongmen Formation. The Hongmen Formation was one of the three great formations of the Hongmen. The so-called Hongmen Formation was the sixth interstellar formation, the Hongmen Immortal Formation, and the Hongmen Killing Formation. Among them, the sixth interstellar formation was the Star Protection Formation set up on the sixth planet of Chun Luo. Its offense and defense were balanced, and it was created by gathering the power of the entire star. However, unless it encountered a power that threatened the entire star, it would not be easily activated. The Hongmen Immortal Formation was the sect formation of the Hongmen sect. On the other hand, it was a great formation that focused on defense. It was in operation almost all the time. It was the Mountain Protection Formation of the Hongmen sect. The last one was the Hongmen Killing Formation. Its power could be seen from its name. It was the only killing formation among the three great formations of the Hongmen sect. The Hongmen Peak itself was a dangerous place. The Hongmen Palace was a collection of millions of resources of the Hongmen sect. It was said that the Hongmen Palace could trap reincarnation-level cultivators. However, no one had tried it before, because no reincarnation-level cultivator had ever entered the Hongmen Palace. Usually, the Hongmen Palace was a place for meetings and banquets. Many of the Red Dust sect's cultivators had forgotten about it. In fact, they didn't even know that the Hongmen Palace was a great killing formation. The Hongmen Killing Formation would not allow reincarnation. This was an old saying that had been passed down in the Hongmen sect. However, time was like a grinder, and everything had been crushed. However, today, Mu Hongqin's shout had naturally activated this amazing immortal formation. As soon as Mu Hongqin's light screen appeared, Jian Shiyong and the others followed her out of the Hongmen Palace. At the same time, the two personal maids of Mu Hongqin also went out. Outside the Hongmen Palace, they floated in the air. Mu Hongqin stood at the front, and behind her were the two maids. The other cultivators of the Hongmen sect stood in a fan shape. They were all staring at the Hongmen Palace. At this time, there were not many changes outside the Hongmen Palace. They thought that Sumo must be struggling inside. Sect Master, can this formation trap Murong Huang? Jian Shiyong asked. We'll know once we take a look. Mu Hongqin replied calmly. That Murong Huang is a big fish. There seemed to be more to Mu Hongqin's words, but Jian Shiyong didn't dare to probe further, because he felt that his sect master was becoming more and more mysterious and unfathomable. Just like this time, before Mu Hongqin made things difficult for them, they did not know the sect master's intentions at all. Murong Huang was actually a devil moon cultivator? That was simply inconceivable. Luckily, he was seen through by the sect master. Hongmen Palace. At this time, Sumo stood alone in the Hongmen Palace, calm and unruffled. Everything around him had already changed. A red screen. Red light. Everything around him was red. Sumo seemed to be in a blood-red enchantment. The red light was sometimes gentle, sometimes intense. It flickered between bright and dark, constantly changing. However, Sumo stood in her original position and did not make any movements. There was not the slightest hint of nervousness on his face. If the red dust cultivators outside the palace saw this scene, they would definitely be flabbergasted. However, Sumo was surrounded by a faint black light. It was impossible for the red light to get close to him. Hee. Yi Wuhui laughed in Sumo's sea of consciousness. Sumo, it's over now, right? Now you're trapped in this Hongmen Palace. Why is it me? Shouldn't it be us? Sumo joked. I don't care. Yi Wuhui said mischievously. Anyway, I'm in your sea of consciousness. It doesn't matter if you're fine or if I'm there. The key is you, hee. You're actually being treated as a Devil Moon cultivator? Devil Moon cultivator. Sumo also laughed. However, from the situation just now, it's indeed a big accusation. The Red Dust sect seems to view Devil Moon cultivators as ferocious beasts. Accusation? Yi Wuhui was confused. What do you mean? Sumo laughed coldly. I feel that Mu Hongqin should know that I'm not a Devil Moon cultivator, but she said it on purpose. She's a little strange. Why do you think so? Yi Wuhui asked. Just now, I clearly used a Tai Huang technique. However, it's a higher level technique. Theoretically, Wu Er also knows that technique. Therefore, although Mu Hongqin hasn't awakened it, she should be able to use it. Because she basically knows all the other Tai Huang techniques and has passed some of them to the Red Dust sect. However, she said that my technique is the Devil Moon demonic technique. That doesn't make sense. If my technique is the Devil Moon demonic technique, then wouldn't her technique be the Devil Moon demonic technique? But, is it possible that there are people in the Demon Moon world who also know Tai Huang magic? Yi Wuhui put forward his own idea. Sumo was slightly stunned. Now that you mention it, it's possible. Don't forget that we found the word Huang and the red sand on the floating land in the scattered stars zone, Yi Wuhui said. Didn't you say that you have a son named Huang? Xiao Huang? Devil Moon? Hearing Yi Wuhui's words, Sumo was deep in thought. Yi Wuhui said again, Now, we don't know what the Dead Soul world is like. However, if the Devil Moon world is still alive, then according to the legend, it should be the overlord of the Dead Soul Star area. Maybe we should go back to the other side of the Dead Soul Star area and see what the so-called Devil Moon looks like. Sumo said. Yes. Yi Wuhui said, whether it's your star map or the Dead Souls that I've been to, they all look like the future. We don't know the current Dead Soul Star area at all. Suemo nodded, then squinted his eyes to survey his surroundings. What's wrong? You really can't get out? Yi Wuhui said with a smile. How is that possible? Sumo smiled bitterly. It's a piece of cake for me to get out of this palace of Hongmen. I just don't want to scare her. This great formation might be able to trap a cultivator in the first stage of the rebirth realm. However, it's impossible to trap me. Even if I'm really in the initial stage of the one-life immortality realm, it can't trap me. Really? Yi Wuhui was curious. Of course. Sumo said, I have a reincarnation-level puppet. As long as I use my pure child puppet, I can instantly turn this palace of Hongmen into ruins. That's true. But what about puppets? Yi Wuhui said again. Not counting what I've learned in my previous lives, even what I've learned in this life from the 5 wheels can break this killing formation. Sumo said. What 5 wheels has learned can break this reincarnation-level formation? Yi Wuhui was surprised. Sumo, the Pure Land, doesn't even have a sea extermination realm cultivator. All the cultivators above the world-breaking realm are not from the Pure Land. What can you learn from your White Bone Land? Hee. Sumo smiled and nodded. At the same time, his eyes showed a look of reminiscence. That's right. The Pure Land is a low-level cultivation world. However, it used to have many reincarnation travelers, and they might not just be from the 3 realms. My senior brothers and sisters in the Wind Wheel are peerless experts. Back then, I didn't think much of it. But now, the spells that they're passing on are actually still very useful to me. Wind Wheel. If there's a chance, I will find it. Sumo's eyes flashed. Then, he looked at the Hongmen formation and sneered. In my 7th senior sister's eyes, this formation is not a killing formation, because it's too weak. With that, Sumo took a step forward. Get out of the formation. Chapter 681. One step. Boom, boom. Outside the Hongmen Palace, Mu Hongqin and the rest could only see that the entire Hongmen Palace was about to move. At this moment, the entire Hongmen Palace was already emitting blood-red light. From afar, it looked like a furnace, working hard to smelt everything inside. Demonic moon cultivators. At this moment, the entire Hongqian sect was in a state of preparation. There were a total of 72 peaks in the Hongqian sect, and there were tens of thousands of cultivators. The order to prepare for battle had been issued. At this moment, there was a flying ship floating in the air around the Hongmen Peak. Although the 4 flying ships were not interstellar warships, each of them was equipped with powerful magical equipment. Those magical equipment were almost all rebirth grade. It could be said that the Hongqian sect had laid out an inescapable net, making it impossible for Sumo to escape. After all, to them, even if Sumo could rush out of the Hongmen Palace, he would definitely be at the end of his rope. Mu Hongqian floated in the air. Faint red clouds had already appeared under her feet. Sumo had been trapped in the Hongmen Palace for several hours, but there was not much noise. This situation was not normal. Can't the Hongmen absolute array kill Murong Huang? Mu Hongqian already had a bad feeling. It seems that Murong Huang is stronger than I thought. Inside the Hongmen Palace, Sumo took a step out. However, she did not directly exit the Hongmen Palace, but stepped out of her own black light defense. Crackle! In an instant, the red light hit Sumo's body, causing countless sparks. However, they could not hurt Sumo at all. Sumo walked slowly, as if she was in a sea of lightning and fire. However, Sumo was very calm, and there was even a faint smile on her lips. The Hongmen Palace could not do anything to her. Boom, roar! The Hongmen Palace was filled with loud noises. At this moment, the Hongmen Palace was like a ferocious beast, but it could not destroy the small invader in its body. Do you want to take a closer look? Yi Wuhui smiled. Let's take a look. Sumo replied. After all, this is probably the most powerful killing array of the Hongqian sect. Although it's very poor, we might be able to find some useful clues. Sumo said as she walked slowly. There were even steps around it. Sumo walked down the stairs. Gradually, the red light around him began to dim, because all the attacks were ineffective. First floor. Sumo stood on the first floor of the Hongmen Palace. However, this place was no longer the same as when he first arrived. Beneath his feet was a mist that flowed like water. Looking at it, the mist was dense like a fairyland. However, Sumo knew that if the person standing here was not her but a low-level cultivator, he would have already turned into pus. The reason for that was because that mist contained immortal poison. Sumo, look at the paintings on the wall. I think there are words as well, Yi Wuhui suddenly said. Sumo looked around. Through the fog, he saw that there was a painting hanging on the opposite wall of the empty lobby. The painting was more than 3 zhang tall and had an antique feel to it. The painting was of a female cultivator. Her white robe was like snow, and her long hair was like ink. Her white robe hung on the ground, and her long hair reached her ankles. The woman's appearance could be said to be peerless and charming. That was a kind of earth-shattering beauty. All the beauty in the world paled in comparison to this white-clothed woman. However, there seemed to be endless loneliness and sorrow in the woman's eyes. She was leaning against an old pine tree, slightly raising her head as if she was looking at the bright moon in the sky. Beside her, there was a corner of a green coffin that was hidden by a huge rock. There were words on the painting. I have been looking forward to meeting you for 10,000 years. My heart has returned, asking where you are. I have been looking forward to meeting you for 10,000 years. My soul has returned, asking where you are. At that moment, Sumo's expression suddenly changed. Who is she? Yi Wuhui said in surprise. That female cultivator is so beautiful. She is the most beautiful woman I have ever seen. Even a woman like me seems to be obsessed with her. Hee. Sumo's expression softened a little, and then she nodded. This painting is not bad, but it can't show 1/10 of the charm of this female cultivator in white. She is the most beautiful woman in the 3 realms. Yi Wuhui was stunned. You know her, who is she? Her name is Shuang. Sumo said slowly, Look, the inscription on the painting. The Ling clan is immortal, the saint is immeasurable. Yi Wuhui read softly, and then he raised his voice. The Ling clan is the demon clan. Sumo, you said that this is the demon venerable Shui Ying of the Three Realms? That's right. Sumo calmed herself down, and then she took a few steps forward, and stood directly in front of the huge painting, her eyebrows tightly knitted. The demon venerable Shui Ying. But why is the painting of Shui Ying here? Who painted this? That person should at least have seen Shui Ying. However, even in the Three Realms, there were not many cultivators who had seen Shui Ying's real body. The galaxy was shattered, and the whereabouts of Shui Ying and Lihan had always been a mystery. And most importantly, why would there be a painting of the demon venerable hanging in the Hongmen Palace? Moreover, right in front of the painting there was a table. On the table, there were immortal fruits, offerings, and an incense burner. Inside the incense burner, there were 3 long incense sticks as thick as a thumb. The smoke rose in spirals and gradually dispersed. At this moment, the entire fog in the Hongmen Palace actually came from the 3 long incense sticks. The long incense sticks kept burning, but they did not seem to be consumed. They did not become shorter at all. Demon venerable Shui Ying? With a thought, Yi Wuhui had already left Sumo's sea of consciousness. Then, she knelt in front of the painting of Shui Ying, and respectfully kowtowed. Apart from Sumo, that was the first venerable of the Three Realms that Yi Wuhui had ever seen. Although it was just a painting, the cultivators of the galaxy had an inexplicable worship for the venerables of the Three Realms. Because the venerables of the Three Realms were the faith of countless cultivators of the Three Realms. Longing, meeting for 10,000 years, my heart has returned, asking where you are? Longing, guarding for 10,000 years, my soul has returned, asking where you are? Yi Wuhui got up and softly recited, then let out a long sigh. Sumo, I have heard the story of the demon venerable. She was really a beautiful woman. Sumo nodded and smiled. She understood that the word beautiful that Yi Wuhui said was not just about her appearance. Shui Ying, it's been a long time. Sumo also cupped her hands at the portrait. Previously, when Sumo followed Zhuang Xingzi through the hall on the first floor, this portrait was definitely not there. And this portrait was obviously a treasure. The power of the entire Hongmen Palace might be related to this portrait. Since Shui Ying is here, then we won't act rashly. Sumo looked at the portrait, then smiled bitterly and said to Yi Wuhui, Let's go out. It seemed that the Hongqin sect had a lot of secrets. There seems to be the shadow of the demon race in the entire Dead Souls star region. We should really go and find the answer. Okay. Yi Wuhui responded, then with a movement of his soul light, he returned to Sumo's sea of consciousness. Sumo scanned around again, but did not find anything new. He did not touch anything in the Hongmen Palace, then his figure flashed. Then he gently pushed open the door of the Hongmen Palace and walked out. Wow! Outside the Hongmen Palace, Mu Hongqin and the others were holding the fort. Because, in their opinion, there would be a big battle no matter what. Just now, the Hongmen Palace was roaring. In the end, no one expected that Sumo would casually walk out from the main entrance of the Hongmen Palace. This way was even more domineering than when Mu Hongqin and the others came out. How did she enter? How did she exit? This seemed too casual. At that moment, Sumo seemed to have turned the tables. Mu Hongqin saw this and could not help but raise his brows. The 2 maids behind her looked at each other and were about to make a move. However, Mu Hongqin raised his hand and stopped them. At this moment, Sumo took a step and flew into the void. Chapter 682. In the void, Sumo smiled at Mu Hongqin. Sect leader Mu, this Hongmen ultimate killing formation isn't that great. But the portrait of the consecrator in the hall is not bad. Initially, Mu Hongqin's expression when he looked at Sumo was rather calm. But when she heard Sumo mention the portrait, her eyes flashed with endless coldness. Murong Huang, you've seen too much. You talk too much, Mu Hongchen said coldly. If that's the case, I'm afraid you can't leave the 6-star. Oh! Sumo looked at Mu Hongchen with a complicated expression. What can you do to me? Can you really kill me? At this time, Sumo had already seen the 4 flying ships around her. But they were at most similar to the attack from the Hongmen Palace. They couldn't do anything to Sumo at all. Therefore, Sumo was not afraid at all. He just wanted to see if Mu Hongchen had any more powerful tricks up her sleeve. Mu Hongchen raised her hands and waved them lightly. Whoosh! The 2 maids behind her finally made their move. Actually, the 2 maids had been standing behind Mu Hongchen for many years. But almost no one in the Red Dust sect had seen them in action. They looked like 2 maids in the middle stage of the Sea Destruction realm. Their cultivation level was top-notch in the sect, but it wasn't a decisive force. The 2 maids were dressed in red. Usually, they were like Mu Hongchen's shadows. They didn't even have names. They were Mu Hongchen's maids. But today, Mu Hongchen actually asked them to make their move. Whoosh, whoosh, today they displayed their extraordinary strength the moment they made their move. 1 life, immortal realm. 2 red shadows and 2 sword lights went straight for Sumo. And their auras were actually 1 life, immortal realm. They had been concealing their cultivation level. Neither Jian Shuyong nor Zhuang Xingzi had discovered it before. They must have treasures that could conceal their cultivation level. At this time, the 2-star elders and the 4 patrols of the Red Dust sect exchanged looks. In the Red Dust sect, there were 2 more 1 life, immortal realm experts. Was the sect master really a peak immortal realm expert? What? The so-called upper echelons of the Red Dust sect suddenly felt that they did not truly understand the Red Dust sect. However, the situation before them did not allow them to think too much. The 2 maids went straight to Sumo. Sumo, they have demonic energy on their bodies, Yi Wuhui said. Demonic chi? The corner of Sumo's mouth curled into a sneer. Could it be that Mu Hongchen was still testing him? Otherwise, what was the point of these 2 undying maids' attacks? At that moment, Sumo suddenly felt a little annoyed. A hidden demon? He was an existence that he hated the most. Therefore, his heart suddenly turned cold. Today, if he didn't kill 2 people, he wouldn't be able to calm everything down, nor would he be able to vent the frustration in his heart. Destroy! Sumo shouted. He stood in place without moving, but his hands were already forming seals. Bang! 2 beams of mystic light directly met the 2 maids. This time, Sumo did not show any mercy. Every beam of mystic light contained the power of rebirth. The rebirth state could not be compared to an immortal realm expert at all. Just 1 move. The 2 maids in red were directly sent flying by Sumo. They were like kites with broken strings, directly knocked down from Hongmen Peak. 2 beams of red light and 2 lines of blood fell on Hongmen Peak. In an instant, the entire Hongmen Peak was silent. Sumo's move shocked everyone. Because just now, Sumo had been so insufferably arrogant. That meant that the entire Red Dust sect could not withstand a single blow from Sumo. At that moment, everyone felt cold under their feet. Sect Master Mu, are you satisfied now? Sumo asked in a low voice. Murong Huang, are you a rebirth state cultivator? Mu Hongchen's eyes narrowed slightly. Her eyes were already faintly blood-red. At the same time, her cultivation level seemed to be rising. That's right. Sumo nodded. If I want to, I can make the entire Red Dust sect disappear from this world. I just don't want to hurt you. Hee. Mu Hongchen did not seem to hear Sumo's words at all. Sumo's words were not an exaggeration, nor was it a lie. After hearing Sumo's words, the other cultivators of the Red Dust sect all changed their expressions. A rebirth state cultivator was definitely not someone they could fight against. Hee. However, Mu Hongchen's laughter suddenly became even more ear-piercing. However, there was a hint of demonic charm in that laughter, and even a hint of demonic aura. Sumo looked at Mu Hongqin and frowned slightly, because she was familiar with that feeling. Her cultivation level is changing, Yi Wuhui said in a low voice. Sumo, there seems to be some kind of special seal on her body. She has activated that power. Yi Wuhui was right. Mu Hongqin's cultivation level was indeed changing. Cultivators of the Red Dust sect disperse. Flying ships retreat. Mu Hongqin's eyes gradually turned blood-red as she shouted at the same time. The red clouds under her feet tumbled endlessly, like waves of blood. Sect Master! Sect Master! The cultivators of the Red Dust sect were slightly hesitant. After all, they still felt that it was inappropriate to let the sect master face a strong enemy alone. Although Mu Hongqin was usually dignified, the entire Red Dust sect still submitted to her loyally. Retreat. Otherwise, all of you will die. Mu Hongqin shouted again. Jian Shiyong, Zhuang Xingzi, and the others gritted their teeth and directly flew away from Hongmen Peak. The 4 flying ships in the void also retreated and dispersed. These powers were almost useless in a battle of the rebirth state. Mu Hongqin's long hair was scattered in the wind again. However, the color of her hair had already begun to gradually turn red. Her eyes had already completely turned blood-red. Red light, blood light. At the same time, her face became extremely pale. Faintly, Mu Hongqin's 2 canine teeth slightly protruded outwards, like fangs, and even her 10 fingernails were slowly growing. At that moment, Mu Hongqin really looked like a demon. Sumo looked at Mu Hongqin in a daze, and her heart ached. Senior Sister Mu, is this the demon-like appearance you mentioned before? Sumo muttered to herself in a low voice. This was because, before Mu Jinghong died, he had once said, Sumo, my love, please forget that I look like a demon. At that time, Sumo did not really understand that sentence, because even though Mu Jinghong was in red, she was still very beautiful. Sumo, the demon seal on her body should be the legendary demon seal. Yi Wuhui said in shock. The demonic aura on her body is extremely heavy. That is not an ordinary demon. Yes. Sumo nodded. At that moment, his heart was in a mess. Why did this happen? Was this really Senior Sister Mu's previous life? Whoosh, however, this time, Mu Hongqin did not give Sumo a chance to think. She waved both her sleeves, and instantly, red sand filled the sky. Tens of thousands of feet of red sand filled the sky. The entire Hongmen Peak seemed to have changed into a different world. Sumo looked at the red sand and let out a long sigh. Chapter 683. The boundless red sand covered the sky and covered the sun. Sumo had seen Mu Hongqin's technique before. Back then, on the White Bone Mainland's 5 Wheels Windmill Mountain, Mu Jinghong looked like this too. Demonic aura. Demonic intent. At that moment, Sumo even felt that the Mu Hongqin in front of her was so unfamiliar. That feeling of unfamiliarity did not only come from the changes in her appearance, but more from her soul. Mu Hongqin stood in the red sand with a ferocious expression. There seemed to be a demonic beast in her body. It was looking at everything through Mu Hongqin's body. Reincarnation level cultivator. Yi Wuhui said in a low voice, every grain of red sand contains the power of reincarnation. And, of course, Suemo also saw this point. Mu Hongqin was indeed a reincarnation level cultivator, at least the one in front of her was. First stage rebirth realm. However, Sumo could not tell if Mu Hongqin had such a cultivation, or if she had been possessed, or if she had borrowed some other power. If she was, there was no need for her to say that she would become a reincarnation-level cultivator in 3 days. Possessed? Borrowed power? However, Sumo could not tell what was in Mu Hongqin's body. Most importantly, although Mu Hongqin looked like a demon, her mind was very clear. She was still Mu Hongqin, and she was not controlled by any other power. Morong Huang, take this! Mu Hongqin shouted coldly and swung her sleeves. In an instant, the red sand in the sky was like a tornado, heading straight for Sumo. That was a reincarnation-level sandstorm. However, even with such power, it still couldn't do anything to Sumo. After all, there was a difference of 4 small realms between them, and Sumo was a 5th-stage rebirth realm cultivator. However, Sumo was a little hesitant at this moment. Should he fight or not? Sumo, let's go. Yi Wuhui sighed. She could sense Sumo's hesitation. So what if she won against Mu Hongqin? Sigh. Sumo nodded and waved her hand. The red sand that swept towards him was instantly deflected back. However, the red sand avoided Mu Hongqin. Many cultivators from the mortal world were shocked by this scene. At that moment, all the cultivators understood that Murong Huang's cultivation level had already reached an unimaginable level. All of the red sand scattered in front of Sumo about 100 feet in front of him. At the same time, Mu Hongqin felt an irresistible force beneath his feet. For a moment she was frozen in the void by Sumo. Mu Hongqin's eyes flickered with blood-red light as she stared at Sumo blankly. Because she did not know what Sumo meant. Sect Master Mu. Sumo looked at Mu Hongqin and said in a low voice, I'm not a Devil Moon cultivator. But still, I don't want to hurt you. Today I bid you farewell. However, I will be back. Take care of yourself. With that, black fog rose under Sumo's feet, and the demonic boat was already under his feet. Then, Sumo did not say anything else. He turned into a black light, rushed past all obstacles, and disappeared into the sky. He could come and go as he pleased, and no one could stop him. At that moment, all the cultivators who were watching the battle looked at everything in a daze. At that moment they all believed in Sumo's words. If he wanted to, he could make the entire Red Dust sect disappear. There was no sound. The entire Hongmen Peak, and even the entire Red Dust sect, fell into a deathly silence. After a while, Jian Shiyong and Zhuang Xingzi were the first to react. At that moment, the red sand that filled the sky gradually returned to Mu Hongqin's body, and the blood-red color in Mu Hongqin's eyes gradually faded. Her half-exposed fangs retracted, and her long fingernails retracted. Her red hair also gradually turned black, but her face became paler and paler, without a trace of blood. It was as if she had just recovered from a serious illness. Sect Master! Sect Master! The 2 town elders and the 4 patrol envoys all gathered around. Wah! Mu Hongqin suddenly spat out a mouthful of purple blood, and her body was a little unstable. At the same time, she seemed to have aged a lot. However, no cultivator came forward to help her. The Red Dust Sect Master could not be blasphemed. Send my order to all the stars. Prepare for war. Mu Hongqin wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth and said coldly, I want to heal. I will come out of seclusion in 1 month. 3 months later, we will attack the Yuchi sect. Violators. Kill. After saying that, Mu Hongqin did not wait for the cultivators of the Red Dust sect to answer and rose into the sky again. In the void, she grabbed the air with both hands. Looking again, 2 red lights were grasped in her hands. The cultivators of the Red Dust sect could see that it was the bodies of the 2 maids who had been beaten by Sumo before. Their bodies completely turned into 2 red lights and were absorbed into Mu Hongqin's body. Yes. The 6 cultivators knelt together on the Hongmen Peak, not daring to raise their heads. Everything that happened today was enough for the cultivators of the Red Dust sect to digest. To some extent, all their perceptions would change because of today. The red sand dispersed, and the smoke was gone. From a distance, 4 black flying ships were floating around the Hongmen Peak, and the 6 cultivators were kneeling on the peak. That scene seemed to have frozen time. On this day, the Red Dust sect began to prepare for war. The 8th mainland. The 7 major planets of the Dust Net 7-star world. 3 of the stars belonged to Yuchi, and 4 to the Red Dust sect. Perhaps the 7 stars could be considered as the people's happiness and peace. However, they were not as good as the 8th mainland. because the eighth mainland had an inexplicable vitality and vitality. The prosperity of this mainland was far greater than that of the other 7 major planets. In fact, the eighth mainland was the place that the 7 stars cultivators yearned for the most. Peace, prosperity, and joy. If you only looked at the eighth mainland, you would feel that it was not the so-called Dead Souls star field at all. Of course, for the ordinary cultivators of the eighth mainland, they would rarely compare their own mainland with the entire Dead Souls star field. After all, the DustNet 7-star world was only a corner of the Dead Souls star field. Most of them had never left the DustNet 7-star world, and some even spent their entire lives in the eighth mainland. However, who could say that it was not a kind of happiness? Because the outside world was not necessarily beautiful. The Windy Rain Ancient City was a famous city of the eighth mainland. Immortals gathered here, and merchants came and went. The Heavenly Tower was located in the center of the Windy Rain Ancient City. It was a 3-storied building with a completely different world. However, the first floor was completely open to the public. It catered to the most ordinary cultivators. Of course, those who could eat and drink on the first floor of the Heavenly Tower were not ordinary cultivators either. The first floor was not big, and there were only 9 tables. Each table was separated by a screen, so it was impossible to see each other. However, if one paid close attention to the occasional conversation, they would be able to hear it clearly, unless the other party had set up a barrier on purpose. However, since ordinary cultivators chose to eat and drink on the first floor, they would drink to their heart's content and live a carefree life. If they really had something to do, they would go to the second floor. Therefore, the first floor of the Heavenly Tower was relatively lively. A cultivator sat alone at table number 9. He wore a long green robe, and his face was slightly pale. He looked tired, and his eyes were a little unfocused. 4 to 5 jars of wine were placed on his table. There were also a few delicate dishes, but they were barely touched. It seemed like he had drunk quite a lot of wine, and he was even pouring wine for himself. However, there was an exquisite plum blossom magic staff on his table. At this moment, a purple-clothed young girl walked in from outside. Her gaze fell upon the green-clothed cultivator. Chapter 684. The Heavenly Tower was crowded with customers. When the purple-clothed girl entered, the 9 tables on the first floor were already filled with cultivators. "Miss, would you like to go up to the second floor?" The waiter greeted her warmly. "No need." The purple-clothed girl smiled, then pointed at the number 9 table where the green-clothed cultivator was sitting. "I'll sit there. It's too boring for him to sit alone." The waiter thought they knew each other, so he smiled and said, "That's great. Miss, please take a seat. Do you want to order 2 new dishes?" "We'll talk about it later." The purple-clothed girl sent the waiter away, then sat in front of the green-clothed cultivator naturally. The green-clothed cultivator continued to drink, not even looking at the purple-clothed girl. "Uncle, don't you feel bored drinking alone?" After the purple-clothed girl sat down, she smiled at the green-clothed cultivator. The green-clothed cultivator did not want to talk to the girl. However, at this moment, his wine cup stopped in midair. He looked at the purple-clothed girl in a daze. "Uncle?" The green-clothed cultivator's divine sense laughed. "Sumo, he actually called you uncle. It looks like you look a little old after your transformation." Yi Wuhui couldn't stop laughing, because this was the first time she heard someone call Sumo uncle. She found it amusing to call him that. The green-clothed cultivator was Sumo, who had changed her appearance. That day, after leaving the 6th star, she and Yi Wuhui went straight to the 8th mainland. This was because it was the most crowded place in the 7 stars dust world. They wanted to stay for 2 days to see if there was any new information. Hong Chen and the others met Mu Hongchen. However, there was always a trace of frustration in Sumo's mind. After all, everything was a little different from what he had imagined. Therefore, he decided to drink a few cups at the Heavenly Tower. Of course, Sumo was not drunk. He was just trying to find the feeling of being a little smoky with that unfocused gaze. At this moment, Sumo smiled at the purple-clothed girl. "Little girl, am I very old?" Then, he carefully looked at the purple-clothed girl. The purple-clothed girl was only 17 or 18 years old. Purple robes, long hair, and skin as white as snow. The purple-clothed girl was quite beautiful. Moreover, this kind of beauty was different from the beauty of ordinary female cultivators. The beauty of female cultivators often had a kind of celestial aura, as if they were above the mortal world. That kind of beauty was either somewhat cold, like Han Bingyi or the former Mu Jinghong, or it was somewhat dazzling, like Shui Mei, Shui Ying, Shen Yan, or Yun San. However, this violet-clothed girl was different. Her beauty was extremely natural. Or rather, it was natural. Since she was able to enter the Heavenly Tower on the 8th continent, she was obviously a cultivator. However, one couldn't sense much of an immortal aura from the purple-clothed girl. Her immortal aura seemed to have dissipated. What was left was a kind of innocence, but there was also a hint of slyness in that innocence. It was an indescribable feeling. In short, if the purple-clothed girl sat in front of anyone, they probably wouldn't feel disgusted. Instead, they would feel happy. Her smile was very sweet, but there seemed to be a hint of evil in that sweetness. "You're not that young," the purple-clothed girl said with a smile. "Uncle, your face is too pale, as if you've just recovered from a serious illness. It's not good-looking. You should change your face." "Ha! Ha! Sumo, this little girl is right." Yi Wuhui seemed to be very happy as he listened in his sea of consciousness. "This little girl is very interesting. But you can't see through her realm, can you?" Sumo asked secretly. "Indeed." Yi Wuhui hesitated for a moment, then said, "She must have some kind of magical treasure with her, right? Otherwise, there shouldn't be anyone in the 7 stars of dust that even I can't see through." "That's not necessarily true," Sumo said with an indifferent tone. "Maybe she's a venerable." "How is that possible?" Yi Wuhui said in disbelief. "That's not necessarily true," Sumo said, "because I also can't see through this little girl's realm." Yi Wuhui was a little speechless. However, if even Sumo couldn't see through the purple-clothed girl's realm, it at least meant that the purple-clothed girl's background was not small. It should be known that the magical treasure that could block Sumo's detection was at least at the venerable level. "Uncle, why are you in a daze?" The purple-clothed girl stared at Sumo with a pair of bright black eyes. At that moment, Sumo felt as if she had been seen through. "Ha!" Sumo drank the wine in her cup in one gulp. She was a little interested in this purple-clothed girl. This girl is not simple. She shouldn't be a cultivator of the 7 stars of dust. At this time, the waiter came over and gave the purple-clothed girl a bowl and chopstick. The purple-clothed girl didn't stand on ceremony. She directly picked up the wine jar in front of Sumo and filled a big bowl of wine for herself. Then, she picked up the chopsticks and ate the side dishes in front of Sumo. "You two, please enjoy," the waiter said with a smile. At the same time, he muttered in his heart, "It seems that these two really know each other." "Come, uncle, let me toast to you." The purple-clothed girl raised her wine cup. "Ha ha!" Sumo laughed and also raised her wine cup. "Pa!" The two of them gently clinked their cups and then drank up. The purple-clothed girl drank a cup of wine and frowned. "This wine is too ordinary. Uncle, I saw that you drank a few jars, so I thought it was some good wine." Sumo heard and couldn't help but smile helplessly. "Little girl, I didn't say that I would treat you to wine. You're eating and drinking, and you dare to say that my wine is not good?" The purple-clothed girl picked up another mouthful of meat dish and stuffed it into her mouth. "Uncle, I didn't intend for you to treat me Didn't intend for me to treat you? Sumo couldn't help but say angrily, then why don't you sit in front of my table and eat my dishes and wine? Why don't you order it yourself? The purple-clothed girl heard and couldn't help but laugh, because I planned to treat you. Treat me? Sumo actually didn't know what to say for a moment. In a while, can't I just pay the bill? The purple-clothed girl ate another mouthful of food and then filled Sumo and herself with wine. Come, uncle, eat more and drink more. Today, it's all on my bill, don't be polite. Ha ha ha. In the sea of consciousness, Yi Wuhui was already overjoyed. Sumo, she's turning from guest to host. Ha ha. Sumo smiled helplessly. For a moment, he really didn't know how to deal with this purple-clothed girl. The two of them clinked their glasses again and finished their drink. Uncle, actually, I mainly wanted to see you drink alone, it's so boring. Now, I'll treat you to a drink, do you feel much better? The purple-clothed girl smiled and said, I feel that your face isn't so pale anymore. Then I have to thank you. Sumo looked at the purple-clothed girl. He didn't know why, but he always felt that this girl had a trace of familiar feeling. However, Sumo could be sure that she had never seen this girl before. Moreover, Sumo could even be sure that this purple-clothed girl wasn't a cultivator of the three realms, nor was she a reincarnator. As the dark supremacy, Sumo now had a natural sensitivity towards the cultivators of the three realms. There was no mistaking it. Little girl, what's your name? Sumo asked. Uncle, what's your name? The purple-clothed girl asked back. My name is Xiao Luo. Sumo said. Xiao Luo? When the purple-clothed girl heard that, she couldn't help but pout. Your name is very similar to your current appearance. Xiao Luo, Xiao Luo. Desolate, desolate. Sumo was speechless. This was the first time he heard someone explain his name like that. Ha ha! Yi Wuhui laughed and said, the name of the dignified Galaxy Demon King is actually looked down upon by a little girl. What's your name? Sumo asked again. My name is Schwer. The purple-clothed girl looked at Sumo slyly. Uncle? Come, let's drink. Chapter 685. The cup clinks softly, signaling another bowl. In less than 15 minutes, Sumo and the purple-clothed girl had already downed 3 large bowls of wine. The speed at which they drank was even faster than Sumo's own drinking. It seemed that the purple-clothed girl was enjoying her wine. Snow. After finishing her 3rd bowl, Sumo smiled and said, Your name isn't that impressive. Tacky? Snow tilted her head slightly and looked at Sumo. A little. Sumo nodded. At the same time, he picked up his chopsticks and ate a few mouthfuls of food. Earlier, he hadn't been in the mood to eat at all. With Schwer accompanying him at this moment, he felt much more at ease. Snow, you call it tacky? Snow said, unconvinced. What a beautiful name. Exceptionally intelligent, with a pure heart. Hee. Sumo was amused again. Snow, who praises themselves like that? This young lady is really interesting. Yi Wuhui laughed in his consciousness. Uncle, what are you laughing at? Snow put on a serious expression. When did I praise myself? You haven't praised yourself yet? Sumo said. No. Snow hurriedly shook her head. I'm just stating the facts. Exceptionally intelligent, with a pure heart. That's me, the different Snow. How can other Snow compare to me? Snow's skin was as white as snow, and her eyes were black and bright. From the looks of it, she did look exceptionally intelligent. One had to admit, she was definitely an adorable young lady. Sumo, if your realm wasn't high enough and you weren't experienced enough, would you believe her? Yi Wuhui laughed. That's right. Look at her, she's so serious. Sumo said in her mind. But she's definitely an intelligent person. Yi Wuhui laughed. You have to be careful. I feel that this girl isn't sitting here for no reason. Sumo nodded in her mind. Snow, what's your surname? Sumo asked again. My surname is Wang. Shui smiled. Wang Shui? Sumo looked at Shui and shook her head. It's still too ordinary a name. Uncle Xiao, you really have no taste. Wang Shui said angrily. Then, she simply ate more food like a child in a fit of pique. Shui, why did you come to this heavenly tower alone to drink wine? Sumo was trying to figure out Shui's background, but she had no clue. After all, he did not understand the Yizong world. What's wrong? This heavenly tower doesn't allow people to drink alone? Didn't Uncle drink alone all this while? Could it be that there are two of you? Cher suddenly raised her head. Her gaze fell on the space between Sumo's eyebrows. Did she find me? Yi Wuhui was a little surprised. Because in that instant Yi Wuhui seemed to see her own reflection in Snow's eyes. It was an extremely mysterious feeling. Snow's eyes were pitch black and bright, but also deep and bottomless. Although Yi Wuhui was inside Sumo's divine sense, he felt like he had almost fallen into it. Are you all right? Sumo asked. I'm fine. Yi Wuhui softened his tone. But this little girl is very powerful. I feel like her gaze can see through your divine sense. Sumo was surprised. However, he did not feel that way himself. However, it was impossible for Shui to penetrate his sea of consciousness. Even if she was a venerable, it was still impossible. Otherwise, no one would be able to keep any secrets from her. Uncle, let's drink. Shui raised her bowl again. Hey! Why are you in a daze? Oh! Sumo was indeed a little confused, so he couldn't help but be stunned. Good. Let's drink. The two finished their fourth bowl. Just like that, Sumo's remaining half jar of wine was gone. Waiter, serve the wine. Snow yelled. Serve the best wine. Miss, what kind of wine would you like? The waiter hurried over and said, We have all kinds of immortal wines in the heavenly tower. Which one would you like? Heavenly immortal brew. Shui looked at the waiter as if she knew everything. I heard that the heavenly tower's heavenly immortal brew is a peerless immortal wine. Give me 2 jars to try. The waiter was speechless. Miss, I'm really sorry. The heavenly tower's heavenly immortal brew is reserved for the guests on the top floor. Forget 2 jars, I can't even make 1 bowl. Would you like to try other immortal wines? What kind of stupid rule is this? Shui said disdainfully. Then, she turned to Sumo and said, Uncle, why don't we go to the top floor and have some wine? Miss. Before Sumo could say anything, the waiter said awkwardly, If you want to go to the top floor, you'll need the heavenly seal. Otherwise, the top floor won't be open to you. Heavenly seal? Shui frowned. What's that? The heavenly tower's special medallion. Sumo said, I heard that there are only a few of them in the entire 8th mainland. So, don't even think about it. You'd better stay here and drink a few jars. If you really don't like it, I have another jar of old wine here. You can try it. Shui harumphed coldly, feeling a little disappointed. Then, she waved her hand, signaling the waiter to leave. Uncle, bring out your wine. Let me have a taste. Shui was disappointed that she couldn't drink the heavenly immortal brew, but she seemed to be looking forward to Sumo's wine. It seemed like she really liked drinking. Do you really want to be a drunkard? Sumo smiled and said, Since you're going to pay the bill later, I'll treat you to a jar of my good wine. How can there be such a good-looking drunkard like me? Shui mumbled, I'm the little wine fairy. Sumo laughed, then patted her storage pouch. He placed the remaining jar of 7 stars bitter dew on the table. That jar was prepared by the heavenly towers by Yue. This jar was different from the other jars in the heavenly tower, but it still belonged to the heavenly tower. Fortunately, there was a screen around their table, and almost no one on the first floor knew about the heavenly immortal brew jar. Therefore, no one paid any attention to it. Uncle, what kind of wine is this? Shui asked. 7 stars of bitter dew. When Sumo heard this, He simply said this name. 7 stars bitter dew? A strange look flashed across Shui-Er's eyes, but it only lasted for a second. However, Sumo managed to catch a glimpse of it. What? Have you heard of this wine before? Sumo asked with a smile. No. Shui-Er shook her head. But why does it sound so familiar? Perhaps my grandmother told me about it before, but I can't remember. Could it be that one of the 7 stars of dust brewed this immortal wine? Who is your grandmother? Sumo said. My grandmother is my grandmother. Uncle, why do you have so many questions? Shui-Er rolled her eyes at Sumo. Open the wine. Are you going to give it to me or not? With your temper, if you met my second aunt, you'd probably be beaten to death. Because it takes too long to open the wine, and she can't wait. Actually, Sumo really wanted to ask who his second aunt was. However, he was afraid of being rebuked again, so he refrained from asking. Thus, Sumo gently opened the clay seal. The aroma of the 7 stars bitter dew instantly spread in all directions. At this moment, a storekeeper on the first floor couldn't help but look at Sumo with a slight frown. Chapter 686. 7 stars bitter dew, Tianyi immortal brew. It was definitely no ordinary wine. However, the aroma of the 7 stars bitter dew was not strong. Ordinary cultivators wouldn't be able to tell that it was Tianyi immortal brew. However, the manager of the first floor of the Heavenly Tower could tell with a single sniff. Drinking Tianyi immortal brew on the first floor of the Heavenly Tower? Sumo and Wang Shui were probably the first to do so. The manager glanced at Sumo and Wang Shui, but didn't say anything. He knew that they were no ordinary people. That jar of Tianyi immortal brew was given out by his restaurant. Therefore, he called over the waiter and whispered something into his ear. The waiter turned around and went to the back hall. Table number 9. Shui lifted her nose and said, Uncle, this wine smells ordinary. Try it. Sumo personally filled Shui-Er's bowl. Shui didn't invite Sumo. She picked up the bowl and drained it in one gulp. Hiss, the 7 stars bitter dew was extremely bitter and spicy. In the 3 realms, only cultivators at the immortal realm and above could drink pure 7-star bitter dew original liquid with large bowls. Those with insufficient realms could only drink it after mixing it. In the Yizong world, only deity-bearing realm cultivators and above could drink it. Of course, Shui-Er's realm should be sufficient. However, the bitter and spicy feeling made her frown. But soon, her eyes brightened. The 7 stars bitter dew's characteristic was that it was bitter at first, then sweet, with a lingering aftertaste. It felt like she was at the end of her rope, then suddenly had a glimmer of hope. It was a wonderful feeling. Hiss. Ah. Shui smacked her lips and looked at Sumo. Uncle, this wine of yours is not bad. Not bad? Sumo laughed. Such a good wine, but you only think it's not bad. It seems like you're a wine taster who has tasted many immortal brews. Shui nodded formally. My aunt's wine is even better than this. Too bad I didn't bring it with me. Otherwise, you would never forget it. Oh? Then I'll be waiting for you to give me wine. Sumo laughed. This little girl sounds like a junior from a cultivation family, Yi Wuhui said. Yes. Sumo smiled bitterly in her heart. Grandma, big aunt, and second aunt have all come out in such a short time. I wonder how many people are behind her? Could she be someone from the Devil Moon world? Yi Wuhui said. It's possible. Sumo said. Shui, you're not a cultivator from the 8th mainland, are you? Sumo poured herself a bowl and asked. No. I come from a galaxy far away. Shui-Er's words were flawless. Uncle, are you from the 8th mainland? No. Sumo shook her head and said, I'm also from a star field far away. Then it must be fate that brought us together. Snow raised her bowl of wine. Her interest in wine seemed to be far greater than her interest in Sumo. This was because she did not ask Sumo too many questions and did not seem to be curious. In this aspect, she was the opposite of Sumo. Come, uncle, let me toast to you again. Schwer drank a lot of wine in a hurry. Sumo was a great cultivator in the rebirth realm. If it was a cultivator below the rebirth realm, they would not even have the right to drink with this little girl. This was because even a cultivator would be drunk if she drank like this. Uncle, you have a great capacity for liquor. Schwer put down her bowl and said, Your capacity for liquor is even better. Sumo laughed. The way you drink, I believe that you're a wine fairy. Ordinary people are no match for you. Schwer continued laughing. Unfortunately, uncle, you're not ordinary. Oh? Why do you say that? Sumo asked. Because you're a rebirth realm cultivator, Schwer said casually as she poured another bowl of wine. This time, she did not drink it in one gulp. Instead, she sipped it slowly. Sumo could not help but be slightly stunned. In her sea of consciousness, Yi Wuhui's expression changed as well. It seemed that this little girl was indeed a peerless expert. She could actually see through Sumo's cultivation? You can see through my cultivation? Sumo looked at Schwer and could not help but narrow her eyes. Schwer sipped her wine and said, Uncle, don't be nervous. I can indeed see through your cultivation. You're a rebirth realm cultivator after all. No cultivator can hide their cultivation base in front of me. As she spoke, she looked at Schwer's eyes, which were slightly red. Her blood-red pupils seemed to be moving slightly. In the center of her blood-red pupils, there was a trace of demonic purple light. However, everything disappeared in an instant. Schwer's eyes returned to normal, black and white, clear and bright. It was a very special kind of pupils, which seemed to far surpass Sumo's demon eyes. Purple blood demon eyes. Yi Wuhui exclaimed, Sumo, that seems to be the legendary purple blood demon eyes of the Izang realm. Purple blood demon eyes? Sumo had never heard of it. The ancestral master said that it is an extremely powerful talent. It wasn't something that was cultivated, but something that was innate. Even in the entire Izang realm, it is a rare existence. It is said that the purple blood demon eyes can see through anything. Its most basic ability is to see through everything. At the same time, those who possess the purple blood demon eyes can use it to cast extremely powerful spells. She must have discovered me, Yi Wuhui said. Hello, sister. Schwer seemed to be able to hear Yi Wuhui's words. She directly raised her cup to Sumo's forehead and smiled. If there's a chance, let's have a drink too. With that, Schwer drained the cup of wine in one go. Who are you? Sumo's heart slightly tightened. Because this Wang Shui seemed to be the scariest cultivator he had met in the Izang realm. Are you from the Devil Moon realm? Sumo asked again. Devil Moon realm? Wang Shui shook her head and smiled. What is a small devil moon? The entire Dead Soul star field, in my opinion, is a small place. Sumo sneered. You talk big? What I said is the truth. Wang Shui looked at Sumo slyly and said, Uncle, quickly drink another cup, because the people from the Devil Moon realm are going to find you soon. Sumo's mouth curved. Is that so? Of course. Wang Shui poured wine for Sumo and herself. Isn't this what you want? Otherwise, why did you put that plum blossom staff on the table? Are you afraid that others don't know that you have a token of the Devil Moon? Sumo smiled but didn't say anything. However, he did put the plum blossom staff on the table to lure the cultivators from the Devil Moon realm. Because Sumo had a feeling that since the staff of the Devil Moon realm was in the Red Dust sect, the cultivators from the Devil Moon realm should have already appeared in the Dusty Seven Stars world. Unfortunately, this Wang Shui denied her identity. She was not a cultivator from the Devil Moon realm. The people from the Devil Moon realm are coming soon, Wang Shui said with a smile. Then, she lightly touched Sumo's cup of wine and drained it in one go. Sumo was about to raise her cup. At this moment, a man who looked like a manager of the Heavenly Tower came to table number 9. He bowed deeply to Sumo and Wang Shui and said, "Two distinguished guests, our tower master invites you to the top floor for a chat." Hearing this, Sumo couldn't help but look at Wang Shui. On the other hand, Wang Shui was looking at Sumo with a smile. "Uncle, what do you think?" Chapter 687. Could the Heavenly Tower be the power of the Devil Moon world? Sumo looked at Wang Shui, feeling puzzled. If that was true, it was indeed out of Sumo's expectation. "Can we drink the Heavenly Immortal Brew on the top floor?" Before Sumo could speak, Wang Shui asked the manager of the Heavenly Tower. "Of course." The manager smiled. "The Heavenly Immortal Brew is exclusively provided on the top floor. If you like it, you can enjoy it to your heart's content." "Great." Wang Shui lightly slapped the table. "Uncle, let's go. I heard that the Heavenly Tower's master is a peerless beauty. You can feast your eyes on her." Sumo smiled and said nothing. She put away her plum blossom staff and followed the manager and Wang Shui to the top floor. Not long ago, Sumo had been here. This time was basically the same as the last time, but the person leading them had changed. However, the manager still led them to the 3rd floor, then performed a hand seal. Immediately, a door of light appeared in front of them. Stepping into the door, they instantly arrived at the so-called top floor. In fact, this was another space. Their vision was bright and filled with auspicious clouds. "NN." Wang Shui looked around and said arrogantly, "The Heavenly Tower deserves its reputation. You've put a lot of thought into this mechanism." "Thank you for your compliment, miss." The manager smiled and said, "This way, please." This time, Sumo wasn't invited to Immortal Pavilion number 1. Instead, they took 2 turns and arrived in front of a green wooden door. The wooden door wasn't as imposing as the previous Immortal Pavilion number 1, but it was more elegant. On the lintel of the door were 3 ancient characters, "Carefree Residence." It didn't look like a private room of the Heavenly Tower, but more like a special room. "Please come in. Our tower master has been waiting for you for a long time." The green wooden door opened from the left and right. The manager stepped aside and gestured for Sumo and Wang Shui to come in. "Thank you." Wang Shui nodded and walked in front of them naturally. At that moment, she seemed to be the master, while Sumo followed behind like a servant. Sumo smiled faintly. He didn't mind. After all, his current image wasn't very good. His face was pale and he looked a little sick. It was not bad to walk behind Wang Shui. Wang Shui and Sumo entered the house. The wooden door immediately closed. However, there was no one in the house. Moreover, the room was not big. There was only a square table and 4 chairs in the middle of the room. That would take up half the space in the room. On the square table, there was a pot of wine and 4 wine cups. The flagon was silver and gleamed. The cups were of silver and were carved with strange designs. Other than that, there were also a few plates of immortal fruits and spirit food. "Where is he?" Wang Shui frowned slightly and couldn't help but look at the side of the room. That was the west side of the room. It looked like a white wall. "Two esteemed guests. I have been waiting for you for a long time." The voice rang out, and the white wall on the east side instantly turned illusory. Then, a woman in a green dress walked out from the white wall. She had an extraordinary temperament and a beautiful face. Her pair of watery eyes rippled slightly. Her collarbone was exposed, and it was very captivating. When Wang Shui saw this female cultivator, her gaze fell on her neck. She couldn't help but frown slightly. She didn't seem to like the woman's captivating appearance. When Sumo saw the woman, his heart skipped a beat. Because it was the first Heavenly Towers by Yuer, whom he had met not long ago. Naturally, she still wore the white jade holy gourd pendant on her neck. Sumo, by Yuer didn't change her appearance. Yi Wuhui said, It seems that she didn't recognize you. Otherwise, according to her habits, she would have changed her appearance to meet you, right? Sumo nodded in his heart and at the same time mocked himself. Fortunately, not everyone has the purple blood demon eyes. Otherwise, my spells would be useless. Yi Wuhue smiled but didn't say anything. You are the first Heavenly Tower's master? Wang Shui looked at Bai Yuer, and her tone was slightly cold. Yes. Bai Yuer smiled faintly. Please take a seat. As Bai Yu spoke, she went straight to the square table and poured 2 glasses of wine for Su Mo and Wang Shui. At the same time, she poured a glass for herself. The fragrance of the wine was exactly the same as the one Wang Shui had drunk before. Wang Shui immediately knew it was the 7 Stars Bitter Dew. She couldn't help but turn around and look at Sumo. Sumo smiled and didn't say anything. Then, Wang Shui and Sumo sat on Bai Yuer's left and right. I heard that the 2 of you were drinking the heavenly wine on the first floor. You must be the Heavenly Tower's distinguished guest. The waiters in the tower are not observant, and I'm afraid they have neglected you too. This cup of wine is my apology to the 2 of you. Bai Yuer's smile was gentle and sincere. This was slightly different from the smooth and slick attitude she showed in front of Zhen Yingbu and Ning Biu. Wang Shui raised her cup and looked at it, but didn't drink it. The first Heavenly Towers, Bai Yuer? That's right. Seeing that Wang Shui didn't drink, Bai Yuer's expression didn't change much. May I know this little sister's name? Wang Shui. Wang Shui said directly. And this is? Bai Yuer asked Sumo. I am Xiao Luo. Sumo cupped her fists at Bai Yuer. Xiao Luo? Bai Yuer was slightly startled when she heard this. Why? Sumo smiled and said, Is there anything wrong with my name? No. Bai Yuer immediately regained her composure and said with a smile, However, fellow Taoist Zhao's name is very similar to a friend I know. Wang Shui couldn't help but sneer. Uncle, it seems that there are quite a lot of ugly names. Sumo, this Bai Yuer obviously knows you. Yi Wuhue said, She must have some kind of connection with the 3 realms. She must have heard of the name Demon King Xiao Luo. That should be right. Sumo replied, You should know that the jade pendant she is wearing should be transformed from Green Soul's white jade celestial gourd. This heavenly tower is not ordinary, it might be related to Paradise Earth. But how could she brew the 7 Stars Bitter Dew? Supreme Buddha's celestial gourd? Yi Wuhue said. Sumo had never mentioned this to him. It seemed that Sumo had long felt that this Bai Yuer was somewhat special. Tower Master Bai, don't tell me you asked us to come up just to say some polite words and drink a few cups of Tiani celestial brew? Wang Shui had been holding the wine cup, but she didn't take a sip. Let's drink a few cups first, then I have something to discuss, Bai Yuer said with a smile. Wine can't be casually drunk. Just now I drank quite a lot downstairs. Wang Shui actually changed her attitude towards wine and said to Bai Yuer indifferently, Tower Master Bai, if you have anything to say, just say it quickly. Uncle and I still have something to discuss. Wang Shui's attitude made Sumo a little confused. This girl was completely different from before, she didn't know why. Hearing this, Bai Yuer gently put down the wine cup and said with a smile, Since little sister has something urgent to discuss, I'll make it short. I have 2 questions that I'd like to ask you too. Say it, Wang Shui said. Sumo couldn't even get a word in edgewise. First, may I know where did you 2 get your Tiani celestial brew? After all, the amount of Tiani celestial brew given out by the Heavenly Tower can be counted on one hand. Second, I heard from the others that there was a plum blossom staff on your table just now. Can I have a look at it? Hearing this, Wang Shui couldn't help but sneer. Uncle, it's all your business. Did you steal something from someone else? The error-free chapters of A Hidden Samsara will continue to be updated on Handplay Bar. There will be no advertisements on the site, so please bookmark and recommend handplay bar. If you like a hidden samsara, please bookmark. 1. A hidden samsara, handplay bar updates the fastest. Chapter 688. Stealing from others? Hee. After listening to Wang Shui's words, Yu Wuhui couldn't help but laugh. Sumo, I don't know if this Wang Shui is helping you or scamming you. Steal? Sumo didn't look at Wang Shui, but directly looked at Bai Yuer and said, House Master Bai, these two questions of yours are very interesting. It does sound like something on my head. However, the Tiani Divine Brew was a gift from a friend. As for this plum blossom staff, Sumo flipped her hand and the plum blossom staff appeared in her hand. It was originally mine. Bai Yuer smiled. Fellow Taoist Xiao, don't blame me. I didn't mean to accuse you, much less accuse you of stealing. However, the jug of wine you just now seems to be the same jug given away by the Heavenly Tower not long ago. However, I can confirm that it's not for fellow Taoist Xiao. As for that staff, Bai Yu's gaze fell upon the plum blossom magic staff, and then she said indifferently, if my information is correct, this magic staff is a magic staff. This staff should be in the Red Dust Pavilion of the Red Dust sect. A few days ago, it seemed to have been given away, but how did it end up in your hands? Tower Master Bai, you don't seem to be a simple merchant. Sumo's eyes narrowed. You even know everything about the Red Dust sect. For those who know, you're the first Heavenly Tower's master. For those who don't know, they might think that you're the sect leader of the Hongqin sect. Hee. Bai Yuer's face was still full of smiles when she heard this. Fellow Taoist Zhao's words are really sharp. How do you expect a weak little girl like me to have a foothold in the Dust Sift 7 stars? Tower Master Bai, please don't say that. If you're a weak woman, then I'm afraid there aren't any strong women in the entire Chen Luo 7 stars. Sumo spoke slowly. Now I've answered all your questions. What do you want? I don't want anything. Bai Yuer retracted her smile and said, Fellow Taoist Xiao, you can drink my Heavenly Tower's wine for free. But you have to leave this staff behind. Because it's very important. Leave this staff behind? Sumo couldn't help but laugh coldly. Tower Master Bai, it's not just you. Even if sect leader Hongqin were to come here personally, he wouldn't be able to take this staff away. Fellow Taoist Xiao, no matter who you are or what your identity is. Bai Yuer's tone became more serious. Leave this staff behind. It will definitely be beneficial to you. Ha ha ha. Sumo looked at Bai Yuer. House Master Bai, I said that this staff belongs to me. No one can take it away. As he spoke, Su Mo had already stood up. It doesn't matter if it's Xiao Luo or Murong Huang. Bai Yuer stared intently at Sumo. At this moment, she seemed to have guessed that they were the same person. Fellow Taoist, if you don't listen to my advice, you'll regret it one day. Today, he could only offend him. Because the sect leader of the Red Dust sect wants your life. You probably can't get out of the Dust Net 7-star world. Who, as soon as Bai Yuer's voice fell, the surroundings instantly changed. The tables, chairs, and the 4 walls had all disappeared. This place is actually an illusion? The wine cup in Bai Yuer's hand suddenly shattered. At the same time, her figure rapidly retreated, and in an instant, she disappeared from the place she had just appeared. Looking again, the sky was filled with light rays that exploded like a star. The cup of heavenly wine had turned into countless ice needles, and the energy contained within them was not the energy of immortality, but the energy of reincarnation. It seemed like reincarnation-level energy was not rare in the Dust Net 7-star world. However, they had always been hiding in the depths of the world. Sumo couldn't help but sneer. Although the cup of wine had surprised Sumo, Sumo was prepared for this. Otherwise, he wouldn't have taken out the staff in the Heavenly Tower. Sumo flung her long sleeves, which turned into a green light. Puff, puff, puff. The ice needles hit Sumo's green light and instantly turned into nothingness. Ha ha! Wang Shui, who was standing beside her, actually laughed. At this moment, Sumo finally noticed that the cup of wine in Wang Shui's hand had also turned into thousands of ice needles. However, the ice needles didn't disperse at all. Instead, they all hovered above the cup. Specks of starlight seemed to have been compressed into a 3-inch space by an indescribable force. "Uncle, what do you think? I told you not to drink this wine carelessly," Wang Shui said with a smile. Then, she flipped her wrist and said, "Tower Master Bai, this cup of wine is for you." The corner of Wang Shui's mouth curled upwards. The cup of wine in her hand flew in the direction where Bai Yue had disappeared. Boom, crack. The power of this cup of wine was even stronger than before. Obviously, Wang Shui had added her own energy into it. The condensed energy was like a clap of thunder, exploding the space around them. The sky was filled with starlight and endless energy waves. Sumo and Wang Shui shot up into the sky almost at the same time. The heavenly tower was nowhere to be seen. They were completely in the void. Looking down, they could vaguely see the outline of the 8th mainland. At this very moment, they were in the middle of the universe. The top floor of the heavenly tower was the universe. In the distance, Bai Yue had changed into a black dress. She looked as elegant as a fairy, but her expression was cold. However, she no longer looked like before. It was another face. That face was also beautiful, but it was full of seductiveness. Her cheeks were crimson like peach blossoms. Her beautiful eyes were full of love and desire. At the same time, there was a strange black mark between her eyebrows. The shape of the mark was similar to a feather. However, the white jade celestial gourd pendant was still hanging on her neck. Otherwise, Sumo wouldn't be able to confirm that the female cultivator in front of her was Bai Yue. 1,000 faces in 1,000 days. It seemed that the reputation was well-deserved. Wang Shui looked at Bai Yue with a calm expression. Because her purple blood demon eyes had already seen through everything. Demonic aura, Yi Wuhui said in a deep voice. Sumo, Bai Yue is a member of the demonic race. She's definitely not a real dead soul cultivator. Demonic race? Sumo looked at Bai Yue and sneered. Tower Master Bai, is this your real self? It seems that the 7 stars of dust and the Izong demonic race are fated. As he spoke, Sumo's expression began to change. He once again turned into Sumo's appearance. It's really you. Your art of transformation has already reached the pinnacle of perfection. Bai Yue sneered. Fellow Murong, I'd also like to know, which one is your real self? Which one is your real name? Same here. Both. Sumo's answer was extremely concise. Tower Master Bai, I'd also like to know the relationship between you and sect leader Hong Qin. Also, where did the pendant on your neck come from? No comment. Bai Yue's answer was even simpler. No comment? Sumo's expression suddenly turned cold, and a murderous look flashed across his eyes. In fact, since entering the Dead Soul star domain, various things had already made Sumo rather annoyed. There seemed to be invisible black holes around him, and each hole was extremely deep, without any light to be seen. That feeling was stifling. If you don't tell me, don't blame me for starting a massacre. Sumo stood in the void and reached out with one hand. A green lotus vine had already appeared in his palm. Massacre. Sometimes it could relieve one's worries. Miao Shu House. Chapter 689. Kill. A black light flashed in Sumo's eyes. It was a strong demonic killing intent. Everything that had happened in the 7 stars world had aroused Sumo's killing intent. The first heavenly towers by Yue, who cared who she was? So what if she was killed? If she was killed, a lot of things and people might come to light. In that case, some problems might be solved. Therefore, Sumo took out the lotus vine. At this moment, Wang Shui was standing next to Sumo. She couldn't help but laugh when she saw the lotus vine. "Uncle, your lotus vine is really good stuff. Where did you steal it?" "Haha." Sumo smiled coldly. "I never steal things. You get out of the way." "Okay. Uncle, don't be merciful." Wang Shui smiled evilly. Then, she really did retreat and flew several thousand feet away. Wang Shui's cultivation level was definitely not low. However, she didn't seem to have the intention to help Sumo. At this moment, her attitude seemed to be more like a bystander. "Miss Yi, pay more attention to Wang Shui," Sumo secretly instructed. Now, it was still uncertain whether Wang Shui was a friend or a foe. Therefore, Sumo had to be more vigilant. "Okay. Don't worry," Yi Wuhui said. Whoosh, as he spoke, Sumo had already made his move. The celestial vine in his hand was like an azure dragon as it whizzed toward Bai Yuer. In fact, judging from their previous cultivation levels, Bai Yuer was not worthy to be Sumo's opponent. However, Bai Yuer's body was now emitting reincarnation chi. However, the reincarnation chi was not pure. There was only one possibility. Bai Yuer was not a reincarnation realm cultivator, but she temporarily possessed the power of a reincarnation realm cultivator through a special method. As for what the special method was, it was unknown. It could be a spell, a magic treasure, or even a borrowed power. Bai Yuer looked at Sumo calmly. Chi chi, chi, the sound of something breaking through the air could be heard. According to Sumo's combat strength, she could be said to be invincible beneath the Exalt realm. Therefore, even if Bai Yuer possessed the battle power of a samsara, she would not be a match for Sumo. And at this moment, Bai Yuer's expression changed slightly. Obviously, she was aware of this as well, because the pressure that Sumo emitted suddenly caused her heart and soul to waver. That lotus vine made Bai Yuer feel as if it was a green snake sticking out its tongue towards her. That was not a simple reincarnation power. Bai Yuer did not dare to face it head-on, and could only retreat. At the same time, there were 4 more talismans in her hands. The 4 spirit talismans were divided into 4 colors: black, green, gold, and white, and each of them had a strange aura. Holy Spirit borrowing technique, Feather Clan formation, Bai Yulo shouted. Then, she suddenly raised her hand, and the 4 talismans in her hand instantly scattered. Bang! The 4 talismans went straight to the lotus vines. With a loud bang, the 4 talismans were destroyed by the lotus vines. However, when he looked at the 4 colored feathers that filled the sky, they were like clouds and mist. It was unknown where Bai Yuer had retreated to. The airwaves were like clouds, and at this moment, if one looked from the 8th mainland, it would seem as if the sky had opened. Sumo raised her eyebrows and retracted the lotus vines, holding them in her hands like a long whip. At this moment, the 4 colored clouds and mist around her began to gradually condense and shrink. They gathered and formed, each with their own appearance. The golden feathers turned into a huge bird, spreading its wings and preparing to fly. The green feathers turned into a spirit beast, with clouds forming under its hooves. The black feathers turned into a peacock, spreading its wings like a fan. As for the white feathers, they didn't form any specific shape. The 4 clouds of mist and feathers surrounded Sumo. At this moment, Wang Shui, who was far away, saw it clearly and could not help but say to herself, "One Zong, 3 demon kings? Haha, unfortunately, none of you are real bodies, and you are not even clones. Otherwise, Uncle may not be a match for them. However, what can this little bit of soul intent do?" One Zong Demon Clan has indeed extended their hands to the Dead Souls Star territory. Wang Shui smiled coldly in the end, and then immediately frowned. But what are these 7 stars of dust? Shouldn't you be in the demonic moon world? Wang Shui stood aside and still did not move. At this moment, Sumo looked at the clouds and frowned slightly. Peacock? Looking at the shape of the black fog, his heart trembled. This was because he heard from Yi Wuhui that there were 3 demon kings in the Yizong world, and one of them was the peacock. The three demon kings were comparable to the demon venerables of the three realms, or even stronger. Peacock? Rock? Kirin? At this moment Yi Wuhui also understood. Sumo, since there is the shape of a peacock, it must be one of the other two demon kings. However, why did the other cloud of white fog not form? I have never heard of the fourth demon king in the Yizang world. Haha. I don't know. Sumo shook his head, and then he did not say anything more. He did not even think about it anymore. Because, at this moment, there was not much meaning to it. The lotus vine in Sumo's hand suddenly pulled. Whoosh, paw, the long vine turned into a whip and swung thousands of green lights. At the same time, Sumo's other hand had already formed a seal. Forming a seal with one hand must be a strange technique. A red light appeared in Sumo's palm. Chi. That red light was like a bean in her palm, but it flashed instantly. Whoosh, boom, the lotus vine swept the four clouds of fog, and as if it had encountered something tangible, a loud bang sounded. At the same time, in the galaxy, spiritual light appeared again. The black peacock, with a long cry, swept its long tail and went straight to Sumo. The golden rock spread its wings, opened its mouth, and was full of golden flames. The green Kirin rushed straight to Sumo. The white clouds actually dispersed again. After a loud bang, they did not disperse. When the lotus vine swept, they dispersed and gathered again. Uncle! The power of the demon kings, dispersed but not dead. You have to be careful. Wang Shui shouted in the distance, use the demon flame in your hand. Demon flame. That was the red light in Sumo's hand. Netherworld flame, red lotus flame. That was a supremacy-level Dharma spell of the three realms. At that moment, Sumo was puzzled. Where did this Wang Shui come from? She seemed to know everything. After all, there were only a few cultivators who could recognize his demon flame, even in the three realms galaxy. Chi, Sumo thought, but her hands did not slow down. The red light jumped and divided into four. Sumo flicked her middle finger and thumb, and the four lights went straight to the four demon forms. Whoosh, whoosh, the demon flame of the three realms could burn eternally. Cultivators below the supremacy level could not resist it with their physical bodies. In an instant, the four clouds of fog all turned red. There seemed to be a scream inside the red flame. It was the demon king's soul attached to the talisman. They were completely burned by Sumo's demon flame. After all, they were only a thought on the talisman. The demonic fog dissipated. Sumo only needed one move to break Bai Yu-Er's talisman, and at this moment, he saw Bai Yu-Er standing hundreds of feet away from him. Bai Yu-Er did not leave? However, what right did she have to challenge Sumo? Not only was Sumo puzzled, even Wang Shui could not understand. Because Sumo's power had been revealed. She was an invincible existence below the supremacy level. But at this moment, Bai Yu-Er's eyes did not have the fear from before, but became extremely calm. Sumo, you really surprised me. Sumo sneered and did not say anything. Then, I can only surprise you too. With that said, he looked at the white jade celestial gourd pendant on Bai Yu-Er's neck, which slowly floated up. Bai Yu-Er's body emitted a Buddhist light. Chapter 690. A ray of Buddhist light. That ray of Buddhist light was dazzling to the eyes. In that instant, Sumo's soul trembled. That was because it was the purest power of the Buddhist lady, green soul and scattered cloud venerables. The white jade fairy gourd pendant flew up. Instantly, the pendant turned into a white jade fairy gourd. The mouth of the white jade fairy gourd opened, and thousands of rays of white light poured down. It was like a path of light, spreading under Sumo's feet. At the same time, an unparalleled suction force tried to swallow Sumo. The white jade fairy gourd was trying to take Sumo. If Sumo was an ordinary rebirth realm cultivator, he would not be able to resist the suction force of the white jade fairy gourd. That was because it was a venerable divine weapon. If the Buddhist lady was controlling it, it would be comparable to the 9 coffins. However, at that moment, Sumo had a thought. Black fog rose under his feet, and demonic aura surged. The demonic boat had already appeared under his feet. The demonic boat versus the fairy gourd. Originally, Sumo's footsteps were indeed a little forward. However, his feet seemed to be rooted to the demonic boat. The demonic boat did not move an inch on the white light. Bayuer's eyes narrowed. She did not recognize the demonic boat. However, her fairy gourd pendant could not do anything to Sumo? One had to know that before this magic treasure was invincible. The white jade fairy gourd tilted in the air and kept spinning. However, it could not do anything to the demonic boat. Ha ha! Suemo looked at Bayuer and could not help but laugh coldly. Looks like you're not the successor of Paradise Earth. Otherwise, how could this exalted treasure only possess such strength? Where did you get this white jade fairy gourd? Where is its original owner? Bayuer did not reply to Sumo. Instead, she quickly formed a seal with her hands. Looking again, there was a black light that was tens of thousands of meters wide rising from her back. Within the black light were long black feathers. They were stacked on top of each other. Peacock plume? It's a peacock? In the distance, Wang Shui's mouth curved. Unfortunately, you little peacock encountered the Demon King. If your ancestor was here, I'm afraid it would still be possible. Demon race peacock. At this moment, Yi Wuhue also recognized Bayuer's identity. The demon race and the peacock race were extremely noble, because their king was one of the 3 great monster kings. The Peacock clan had actually appeared in the Dead Souls star field? One must know that Sumo and Yi Wuhue lived in an era that was several million years ahead. At that time, the Izong demon race had already infiltrated the dust world. The more he thought about it, the more terrifying it was. Before Bayuer used this Dao technique, no one would have guessed that she was a member of the Peacock tribe. Chi-chi, Bayuer's body moved slightly. Thousands of black lights shot towards Sumo like feathered arrows. They were so densely packed that almost no wind could pass through. That was Bayuer's final killing move. Peacock plume. Peacocks below the rebirth realm could only use this spell once every 3,000 years. This spell could allow one to kill those above their level. A first life immortal realm peacock could kill a rebirth realm expert. However, after using this technique, the peacock had to rest for 100 years and could not fight again. Therefore, the Peacock tribe would not use this spell unless they had no other choice. Now, Bayuer was at her wits' end in front of Sumo. Because they were not on the same level. In a sense, it was a pipe dream for her to defeat or even kill Sumo. She did not have that kind of ability. Although she had the white jade celestial gourd, Sumo's foundation far surpassed hers. She could not defeat Sumo just by relying on magic treasures. Each peacock plume carried a rebirth realm killing intent. They were like ink-colored immortal swords that shot towards Sumo. However, Sumo's lips curved and she waved her hand lightly. A sky full of red flowers rose from the demonic boat. Devil's flower. Chi-chi. Every peacock plume was blocked by the devil's flower. The two collided and dissipated at the same time. However, Bayuer's peacock plume was limited, while Sumo's blood rose was endless. Hee. Wang Shui, who was watching from afar, sneered. From her point of view, Bayuer was like an egg striking a rock in front of Sumo. Whoosh, in an instant, all the peacock plume disappeared. Sumo waved her hand again, and countless blood rose surged towards Bayuer like a torrent. At this moment, Bayuer finally understood that she could not do anything to Sumo. Therefore, she wanted to recall the white jade celestial gourd and escape. However, Sumo had already placed the universal pouch in the air. The white jade celestial gourd was a treasure of the 3 realms. How could it fall into the hands of a demon? Return! Sumo shouted. This time, the universal pouch did not disappoint her. The white jade celestial gourd instantly turned into a white light and landed in the universal pouch. Bayuer's expression changed drastically when she saw it. Her body moved and instantly turned into a black peacock. Transformation! The sky full of black light was about to escape. However, she was too naive. The blood rose in the air was like maggots on a bone. The moment Bayuer turned into a black peacock, it had already entangled her legs. Ayo! Ayo! The black peacock screeched to the sky, but the blood rose had already crawled all over its body. Sumo kept the universal pouch, and stepped in front of the black peacock. The immortal vine in her hand shook and directly bound the black peacock. The black peacock once again turned into Bayuer's appearance. However, other than her head, her entire body was wrapped by blood rose. Lotus vines coiled around her neck. The corner of Bayuer's mouth was full of blood. The feather mark between her eyebrows had already become extremely faint. Originally, it was the mark of the Izong demon clan's feather tribe. Now that the mark had become faint, it meant that Bayuer might die. Tell me the secret of the 8th mainland. Sumo's gaze was cold. What is the relationship between the Red Dust sect and the Izong demon clan? Why do you listen to the Red Dust sect leader, Mu Hongchen? Hee. Bayuer looked at Sumo calmly. Are you a reincarnator of the 3 realms? Are you the demon king of the 3 realms, Xiao Luo or Murong Huang? That's right. Sumo did not need to deny anything at this time. Then, he restored his true appearance. He was dressed in white, and his beautiful face was completely revealed. Wow! Wang Shui, who was far away, could not help but widen her eyes. She muttered to herself, "Ha! Uncle Xiao, you are indeed the most handsome man in the 3 realms." At that moment, Wang Shui's eyes were almost filled with stars. Xiao Luo was indeed extremely handsome. However, with a thought, he removed his true appearance, and he still looked like Sumo. Bayuer saw Xiao Luo's appearance and nodded slightly. Then, she laughed bitterly. I died in the hands of the demon king of the 3 realms. It was a worthy death. However, don't even think of getting anything out of me. I won't tell you. Hee. Sumo heard and said coldly, House Master Bai, I'm afraid you don't know my methods in my previous life. Even if you don't tell me, I naturally have my ways. Sumo was the Dark Lord. If he was cold, the entire 3 realms would tremble. As he spoke, Sumo formed a claw with one hand. His slender fingers were glowing with white light, and he pierced Bayuer's head. If you don't tell me, Sumo can search your soul. Demon King, the Demon King will definitely find you. Your wife and son will all die. The reincarnator of the 3 realms will also die. As he spoke, Bayuer looked up to the sky and laughed. At the same time, the mark between his eyebrows instantly emitted brilliance. Boom! The black peacock actually chose to self-destruct. Chapter 691. Boom! That black peacock's original body was an immortal-level immortal demon. However, the power of its self-destruction was still unable to harm Sumo. The blood rose directly formed a defense in front of Sumo. All the power impact was blocked by the blood rose. However, Sumo's expression was somewhat ugly. She would rather self-destruct than let the soul search. Actually, from Bayuer's point of view, she did not do anything wrong. Because, according to Sumo's character, she would not let her go even after the soul search. Instead of being tortured, she would rather choose to self-destruct. Hee. Yi Wuhue sneered. Sumo, we still underestimated the determination of the hidden demon race. This black peacock would rather self-destruct and break the reincarnation cycle than to reveal the secret. We were careless. Sumo shook her head, her tone slightly heavy. Just now, he could completely lock Bayuer's soul. However, he did not expect the other party to be so decisive. Looking at the gradually dissipating aura of the black peacock, Sumo's lips twitched, and she sneered. That kind of smile actually rarely appeared on Sumo's face. Those who were familiar with the Underworld Supreme would know that it was an expression of extreme anger. Demon King, the Demon King will definitely find you. Your wife and son will die. 3 realms reincarnators will also die. Bayuer's words before her death touched Sumo's reverse scale. The Demon King found Sumo, but Sumo did not mind. However, Bayuer used her wife and son, and 3 realms reincarnators to threaten Sumo. This was something that Sumo could not tolerate. Previously, the matter of 9-tailed raccoon had not been resolved, and now the peacock race had appeared. New hatred and old hatred. The hidden demon race had already been blacklisted in Sumo's heart. But Yi Wuhui knew what Sumo was thinking, so he said slowly, Bayuer's words can at least prove that your son and wife are still alive. And Sumo nodded, then let out a long sigh. Xiao Huang, he really reincarnated. That's a blessing in disguise. With a wave of Sumo's hand, Bayuer's aura completely dissipated in the interstellar space. However, at this moment, a ray of light suddenly appeared in the void. It was an item that had not perished after Bayuer self-detonated. It was a scroll. Suemo raised his hand and took the scroll in his hand. At this moment, specks of starlight flickered on the scroll. There were many strange symbols on it. Then, Sumo's hand shook. The scroll unfurled. It was a portrait. You? Yi Wuhui's voice was slightly surprised. Because on that portrait was a black-clothed man with a peerless appearance and demonic bearing. In the corner of the portrait, there was a simple blood-red Huang character. The portrait was indeed of Sumo. And? Sumo looked at the portrait and frowned. The person in the portrait was indeed him. However, who drew this portrait? Xiao Huang drew it, right? Yi Wuhui said. Isn't there a Huang character in the corner of the portrait? Sumo shook her head. Xiao Huang? He wasn't even willing to hold a brush since he was young. How could he draw a portrait? Reincarnated, maybe he can draw. Yi Wuhui laughed. Maybe. Sumo smiled helplessly. He did not believe that Xiao Huang could draw a portrait. However, he could not see anything from the portrait. So, Sumo prepared to keep it. However, at this moment, a purple light swept past. Uncle, give this portrait to me. The one who spoke was naturally Wang Shui. And? Sumo's heart couldn't help but be slightly shocked. Because the portrait was still in Sumo's hands, but now it had fallen into Wang Shui's hands. Yi Wuhui, who was in the sea of consciousness, was also shocked. Although Sumo did not deliberately guard against it, it was definitely not easy to take away a portrait from a level 5 rebirth realm cultivator. It could even be said to be impossible. If Wang Shui had wanted to harm Suemo, she could have easily succeeded in doing so. One must know that at this time, Sumo was on the demonic boat. The blood-colored rose was hovering around him. The demonic flower was protecting his body, but there was no reaction when Wang Shui brushed past Sumo's shoulder. This time, thinking about it carefully, it was really scary. Sumo couldn't help but frown slightly. At that moment, he seemed to feel that Wang Shui's footwork was somewhat familiar, but he couldn't remember where he had seen it before. Of course, the most important thing was that Wang Shui's footwork was too fast, and the time was too short. She didn't even give Sumo a chance to observe carefully. Why, Uncle, you're not willing to give me a portrait? Not far away, Wang Shui held the scroll and pouted at Sumo. Then, she looked at Sumo's eyebrows and said, Sister, do you think he is stingy? Yi Wuhui could only smile helplessly. This little girl in purple really shocked her. To some extent, the strength she showed was beyond Yi Wuhui's imagination. You're a martial venerable? Sumo also had a helpless face. So what if I'm a martial venerable? Wang Shui had a proud face. I'm very powerful. Uncle, let's talk about your painting first. Are you giving it to me? Sumo shook her head. Then, Sumo suddenly moved. This time, her speed was extremely fast. An afterimage went straight to Wang Shui. This time, Sumo almost used all her strength. Sumo stretched out her hand and grabbed the scroll in Wang Shue's hand. Wang Shui smiled. Perhaps, in his opinion, Sumo's movement technique was still a bit slow, but in Sumo's opinion, the scroll was already within his reach. However, in the void, what Sumo caught was actually a cold fog. Wang Shui was still not far away, holding the scroll and standing there. Uncle, you can't catch it, right? Sumo didn't speak and took another step. This time, he used his magical footwork. In an instant, he was already in front of Wang Shui. He stretched out his hand. Unfortunately, what he caught was only an afterimage. Moreover, Wang Shui didn't use the footwork that she displayed just now. Sumo, you're not her opponent. Yi Wuhui sighed softly. Uncle, I'm here. Wang Shui giggled behind Sumo. Sumo looked back and shook his head helplessly again. He knew that he couldn't get the scroll, and he couldn't force Wang Shui to use the footwork again. I'll give it to you, Sumo said impatiently. Stingy. Since I can't get it back, I'll give it to you. Wang Shui pouted. Uncle, if you weren't so handsome, I wouldn't care about this scroll. However, Uncle, you're really good looking. Come, show me your real face. As she said this, Wang Shui flipped her hand and the scroll disappeared. Sumo looked at Wang Shui and laughed. Little girl, you dare to tease me? Who are you? Also, don't call me uncle anymore. With your skill, I'm afraid I have to call you grandaunt. Wang Shui waved her hand. That won't do. Although your realm is low, our seniority can't be messed up. You're old. Uncle, you're an uncle. Sumo was speechless. Uncle, can you give me 2 more things? Wang Shui smiled again. What things? Sumo asked. Them. Wang Shui smiled and waved her hand. In an instant, Sumo's face suddenly changed. Looking at Wang Shui's hand, it was the plum blossom staff and the supreme ghost god's face. Chapter 692. Sumo. Not far away, Wang Shui, who was holding the plum blossom staff and the supreme ghost face, looked at Sumo with a smile. Yi Wuhui exclaimed, because he couldn't believe that Wang Shui actually stole these 2 things from Sumo. How did she do it? As a matter of fact, Sumo asked Yi Wuhui to pay attention to Wang Shui. It could be said that most of the time, Yi Wuhui's divine soul was locked on Wang Shui. Previously, when Baiyuer and Sumo were fighting, Wang Shui didn't move at all. She just watched from a distance. It was just now. At this time, Sumo said in a deep voice, just now I tried to retrieve the painting twice. Not only did I not succeed, but she also stole 2 of my things. Suemo laughed self-deprecatingly. If 7th Sister Windmill knew about this, she would probably shake her head. Sumo, how did she do it? Aren't those 2 things in your Qianquan bag? Yi Wuhui was extremely puzzled. Many years ago, I encountered that situation. My 7th sister can also steal the things in the storage bag. Sumo sighed. The storage bag can't stop the real thief. But that needs the support of the realm. Wang Shui, return the things to me. Sumo looked at Wang Shui and said in a calm voice. Uncle, don't be stingy. Wang Shui tilted her head and raised the 2 treasures in her hand. Don't worry. I just want to borrow this plum blossom staff for a period of time. I really like this ghost face, so I won't give it to you. At this moment, Sumo's face was as calm as water. The black fog under his feet was rolling like a cloud. At the same time, the blood-colored rose in front of him was like a blood snake spitting out its long tongue. At that moment, Sumo's heart was extremely angry. Sumo, calm down. It's very likely that you're facing a venerable. Yi Wuhui said. Wang Shui, return the plum blossom staff to me. Sumo's tone was extremely cold, but she lowered her request a little. Because he understood that even if he fought to the death, his chances of winning were not high. Uncle, When Wang Shui saw Sumo's expression, she was a little unhappy. Why is your temper so bad? I just like these two treasures, that's all. The plum blossom staff is just a temporary loan. I will return it to you in the future. I know it belongs to you. The plum blossom spirits are all yours, right? Sumo raised her eyebrows. Who the hell are you? Sumo asked sternly. Uncle, it's useless to be fierce. Wang Shui said proudly, you're not my opponent. Even if you have the 9 coffins, I'm not afraid. Besides, you haven't. However, I won't take your things for free. This is for you. Wang Shui shook her hand and threw out a white light. The white light floated in front of Sumo and transformed into a white token. On the token, there were mountains, rivers, and people. It looked like a rural idyllic painting. It was as white as jade, but there were no words. Uncle, this is for you. Wang Shui pouted. My token is much better than yours. Keep it, it will be of great use. Sumo glanced at the token. He didn't pay much attention to the others. However, the background of the token was actually a white mountain. Uncle, I have something to do. I'm leaving. Wang Shui waved her hand in satisfaction. We'll meet again. With that, Wang Shui's purple clothes moved and she was about to leave. Wait. However, Sumo shouted softly. Looking again, his magic boat instantly emitted countless rays of light. The runes were like flowing water, scattering in all directions. In an instant, the runes almost covered half of the starry sky. Wang Shui was naturally on the runes. Forbidden diagram technique. This was the strongest technique that Sumo could currently use. He still wanted to try and keep Wang Shui. At this time, those forbidden diagrams were still deducing. Time and space reincarnation. Sumo wanted to pull Wang Shui back to the space before she stole his things. Hu-huar in the starry sky, colorful waves rippled layer upon layer. Wang Shui's body stopped on the forbidden diagram. She didn't move again, but her eyebrows were slightly knitted. Wang Shui, if you want to escape with the things, I'm afraid it won't be that easy. Sumo said, if you return the plum blossom staff to me, you can take that supreme demon god face away. Uncle. Wang Shui looked at Sumo with a wronged look. Aren't you too overbearing? I already gave you a token, is it still not enough? I don't want that token. Sumo said. I only want that plum blossom staff. Wang Shui curled her lips, rather a beauty than a country? Are you people from the 3 realms galaxy so stubborn? Sigh. Wang Shui looked down at the forbidden diagram, seemingly thinking of a way. At the same time, with the constant deduction of Sumo's forbidden diagram, Wang Shui's body seemed to be constantly retreating. It looked as if time was going backward little by little. Time and space reincarnation, it worked. Sumo and Yi Wuhui had a glimmer of hope in their hearts. Just now, the power that Wang Shui displayed really made them despair. After all, with Sumo's current strength, even if any supremacy from the 3 realms were to descend, he could be killed in seconds. Wang Shui was less than 3 feet away from Sumo. Soon, she would be pulled into the previous time and space by Sumo. The forbidden diagram was like a tide, surging forward with great momentum. Sumo's eyes showed light. However, at this time, Wang Shui suddenly raised her head and smiled mischievously at Sumo. Uncle, do you see hope? Sumo was stunned. Sigh. I won't tease you anymore. You're really a boring person. Wang Shui turned around, then with her hands behind her back, she gently stepped forward. The forbidden diagram under her feet actually separated automatically. Uncle, who did you learn the forbidden diagram technique from? It's really too bad. Wang Shui's voice was sweet and clear, full of childlike interest. Perhaps, in her eyes, Sumo's forbidden diagram was like a small game. At this time, cold sweat actually appeared on Sumo's forehead. In the interstellar space, the forbidden diagram that he had just deduced was not under his control at all. This sea of forbidden diagrams seemed to have completely belonged to Wang Shui. They surrendered under Wang Shui's feet. "Uncle, I'm leaving." "Still that sentence, we'll meet again someday. Take good care of the token that I gave you. Don't let others steal it again." Wang Shui didn't even look back. With her back facing Sumo, she waved her hand and then walked toward the interstellar space, as if she was walking on the main road of her own home. In the distance, a purple light door appeared. Wang Shui stepped in and disappeared. At that moment, Sumo stood in the void blankly with a blank look. This was the first time he had felt so lost and helpless since he had reincarnated to the Izong world. He understood that Wang Shui didn't want to do anything to him. Otherwise, killing him would be as easy as taking something out of her pocket. "Sumo! Sumo!" After a while, Yiwuhui, District 8. He called out to Sumo in his mind. This was because Sumo had been standing in the void for more than 2 hours. The surrounding forbidden paintings had long since dispersed. Who was she? This was the question Sumo kept asking herself in her mind. However, he had no answer. No matter how strong you are, there will always be someone stronger. Yiwuhui's call brought Sumo back to her senses, and she let out a long sigh. Then, with a wave of his hand, he put the White Mountain token into his cosmos sack. He had to take this token even if he didn't want it. Chapter 693. The Eighth Mainland was still as peaceful as before. The battle between Sumo and Baiyuer took place thousands of miles away in the starry sky, and did not affect the Eighth Mainland at all. No one on the Eighth Mainland noticed anything unusual either. The smoke had dispersed. Sumo decided to return to the Eighth Mainland's Windy Rain City first. This time, he simply transformed into Zheningbu's appearance. He wanted to enter the Heavenly Tower again. The Heavenly Seal. The waiter of the Heavenly Tower was startled when he saw the Heavenly Seal in Sumo's hand. Immediately after, the waiter brought Sumo to the top floor. With the Heavenly Seal in hand, he had to go to the top floor. That was the rule of the Heavenly Tower. Sumo didn't feel anything different even though he was taking the same route as before. In fact, no one in the Heavenly Tower could tell that something had happened to their Tower Master. The entire Heavenly Tower was operating normally. Baiyuer's death didn't seem to affect it at all. "This Heavenly Tower is definitely not simple," Yiwuhui said. "It must be backed by the power of the demon race." Sumo nodded secretly. He arrived at the top floor once again, and this time, he was brought into the 9th Immortal Pavilion. Sumo ordered some food and wine. "If a friend with the surname Ning comes looking for me, please bring him here." "Please bring him here," Sumo said to the waiter who brought him upstairs. "Don't worry. When he comes, I'll definitely bring him here." The waiter answered, then left. In fact, there was no friend with the surname Ning. Sumo just wanted to wait and see if the Heavenly Tower's Tower Master would come to propose a toast. He poured himself a cup and drank. At the same time, Sumo forcibly spread out his divine sense. He found that everything around him was indeed an illusion. In other words, there was no such thing as the top floor of the Heavenly Tower. This was just an illusory space created by a magical technique. Rooms were separated from each other, forming the so-called top floor. At this moment, Sumo was the only guest in the entire top floor. "How extravagant," Sumo said. "It seems that this is a stronghold of the demon clan." Yiwuhui said, "However, ordinary cultivators can never see through everything. The Eighth Mainland should be controlled by the Izong demon clan." Sumo said. "The Red Dust sect might also be in their hands," Yiwuhui said. "From the looks of it, the Yuchi sect might really be in danger." Sumo sighed. The two of them communicated through their divine senses. On the surface, Sumo had been drinking by herself. However, the first Heavenly Tower Master didn't show up. 2 hours passed. Footsteps could be heard. Someone had arrived outside Immortal Pavilion number 9. The master of the heavenly first tower requests an audience with our esteemed guest. A voice came from outside the door. Sumo couldn't help but furrow her brows. Was there really a first heavenly tower master? Please, Sumo replied. The door opened and 3 female cultivators walked in. The leader was a woman in white, elegant and refined. However, the white jade celestial gourd pendant was missing from her neck. Behind her were 2 maids in colorful robes. One of them was holding a plate of fruits, while the other was holding a jade pot. Apart from the fact that the leading female cultivator wasn't Bayuer, everything else was exactly the same as what Sumo had seen. Even the 2 female cultivators behind her hadn't changed. First Heavenly Tower Master Bayuer greets Patrol Guardian of the Red Dust Sect. The female cultivator in white bowed to Sumo. Oh! Sumo couldn't help but smile. Miss, do you know me? But you're not Tower Master Bai, are you? You know, we just met not long ago. Hearing Sumo's words, the female cultivator in white didn't panic. Instead, she smiled and said, Patrol Guardian, haven't you heard of the first Heavenly Tower Master's 1,000 faces? But, miss, you didn't wear the white jade pendant? Sumo asked again. Of course I'm not Tower Master Bai. Patrol Guardian, you're wrong. The female cultivator in white smiled and said, I'm indeed Tower Master Bai, but I'm not the Tower Master Bai that Patrol Guardian met. What do you mean? Sumo said. The first Heavenly Tower is just a restaurant. Patrol Guardian, you can drink and receive guests here. As long as the wine is good, everything will be fine. Why are you so obsessed with that Tower Master Bai? The female cultivator in white smiled and said, Don't tell me, Patrol Guardian is here to find the previous Tower Master Bai. If Patrol Guardian isn't here for the wine, but for the person, then I'll help you find her. What do you think? Haha. Sumo couldn't help but burst into laughter. Tower Master Bai, you're right. I don't care about that Tower Master Bai. As long as the first Heavenly Tower's wine is good, I'll come. That's it. The female cultivator in white smiled and filled Sumo's cup with wine. Here's to Patrol Guardian. In the future, I hope you'll take good care of my business. Sumo didn't say much. She just smiled and emptied her cup. I have something else to attend to. Patrol Guardian, please enjoy your meal. Your guest is here. Someone will invite her in. Thank you, Tower Master Bai, Sumo said with a smile. After saying that, the female cultivator left the immortal wine and spiritual food and left. Interesting. Yi Wuhui said. After the previous Tower Master died, someone immediately took his place. Furthermore, her words were watertight. The first Heavenly Tower is indeed standing tall. Sumo sneered and didn't say anything. The waters of the 8th mainland, the Dust Sift 7 Stars world, or even the Dead Souls galaxy were simply too deep. The first Heavenly Tower's reaction was extremely fast. In just a few hours, the new Tower Master had already appeared. Sumo stayed alone in the 9th Immortal Pavilion for over 4 hours. At the same time, he was thinking about his next step. In the end, he decided to stay on the 8th mainland for a few more days, then go to the Devil Moon world. Of course, he didn't have any friends with the surname Ning. Therefore, Sumo left the first Heavenly Tower alone. If the people downstairs asked him about it, he would tell them that he had missed his appointment. Right after Sumo left the first Heavenly Tower, in another secret chamber, the female cultivator in white said to a maidservant beside her, Report to Hongkei, there might be something wrong with Zhen Yingbu from the Red Dust Sect. Tell her to be careful. Yes, the female cultivator replied. Sumo left the first Heavenly Tower. For 7 days, he traveled around the 8th mainland. On the surface, the 8th mainland didn't seem to have changed much. However, Sumo had a different feeling. He felt that the atmosphere of the 8th mainland was a bit strange. Many cultivators around him were in a hurry. The number of customers in the restaurants seemed to be decreasing, especially the number of high-level cultivators. However, the continent was still bustling. These days, the battleships docked at the 8th mainland's starport were constantly changing. Of course, there were battleships from the Red Dust sect and Yufeng. Sumo, it seems that the Red Dust sect is really going to attack Yuqi. Yi Wuhui said. Mu Hongqin's words that day were definitely not just for show. If there really is a demon clan behind her, then the small Yuqi sect won't be a problem at all. Sumo frowned. Maybe I should send a message to Ningbyuk. The Yuqi sect is so big, they must have eyes and ears. They should have noticed it long ago. Yi Wuhui said. Haha. Sumo laughed. But they may not know that there is a demon clan behind the Red Dust sect. It seems that the Yuqi sect is in danger. Chapter 694. Samsara of the Ichikata, Untitled Chapter. Please wait for a moment. After the content has been updated, please refresh the page to receive the latest update. Chapter 695. The battle between Hongqin and Uro was bound to happen, and it was only a matter of time. After what had happened to the Red Dust sect, Sumo had completely given up on trying to resolve the conflict between them. That was because such a contradiction could not be reconciled. Its essence was no longer a conflict between the samsara travelers of the three realms. Now, what Sumo wanted to know the most was what was going on with Mu Hongqin from the Red Dust sect, and was Xiao Huang really in the dead spirit world? Therefore, Sumo didn't stay on the 8th mainland for long. He wanted to go to the Demon Moon world. However, before he left a jade slip on a flagship of the Yufeng fleet. He believed that the jade slip would be delivered to Ningbyuk. No matter what, it was better for the Yuqi sect to be more prepared. According to Sumo's estimation, even if the Red Dust sect wanted to attack the Yuqi sect, it would still take them 2 or 3 months to prepare. This amount of time should be enough for him to make a round trip to the Demon Moon world. If there were no extremely special circumstances, he would still want to join the battle between Hongqin and Uro. Of course, Sumo didn't want to change the history of the Dead Soul Starfield, but he wanted to know how Dustnet Star had been destroyed, and where Plum Blossom 5's true body was sealed. After leaving the Jade Slip, Sumo left the 8th mainland and headed straight for the Demonic Moon world. The Demon Moon world was actually near the Scattered Stars zone that they had passed through before. However, their previous spacetime was millions of years in the future. The current Demon Moon world was still extremely complete. Sumo had found a star map on the 8th mainland. Although the star map wasn't very detailed, it roughly pointed out the direction of the Demon Moon world. After leaving the 8th mainland and arriving in the interstellar space, Sumo immediately took out the demonic ship. Then, he stepped onto the demonic ship and began to jump between the stars. The demonic moon world and the 7-star world ran through the entire Dead Soul galaxy, one in the south and the other in the north. Therefore, if Sumo wanted to reach the demonic moon world, she would have to pass through the entire Dead Soul galaxy. Traveling like this was quite a long journey. Back then, they had come on the immeasurable ship. Of course, the speed of the magic ship could reach an extreme, but it still couldn't compare to Sumo's spacetime jump. That was because they were two completely different ways of traveling. Demonic ships and figures would appear in the galaxy at regular intervals. However, in the vast star domain, no one paid attention to it. 3 days later, Sumo stood on the outskirts of a star field. Along the way, Sumo gained a deeper understanding of the Dead Soul star domain. Millions of years ago, the stars in the Dead Soul star region hadn't withered like they would in the future. However, there weren't many small worlds like the Dustnet 7 stars. Many of the stars only had some low-level life forms or cultivators. In the Demon Moon world, there were a total of 9 stars, and these 9 stars were quite huge. In the Dun Luo 7-star world, the largest star was not as big as the smallest star in the Demonic Moon world. At this time, Sumo was standing outside the Devil Moon world. Looking at the 9 different colored stars, she couldn't help but praise. Devil Moon. Not a bad world. The Devil Moon world is really beautiful. Yi Wuhui couldn't help but praise. After that, he paused for a moment. It's a pity that the 9 stars of such a world actually shattered and turned into interstellar dust. Hee hee. Sumo nodded and smiled helplessly. The previous Star River world was much vaster than this Demon Moon world. In the end, didn't it still disappear and shatter? Perhaps many worlds will eventually be destroyed. Death is the final destination of everything. Sumo let out a long sigh. It seemed that she was a bit emotional. For a while, the two of them didn't speak. They were both looking at the 9 stars of the Demon Moon. Each of them had their own trajectory, and at the same time, they also had their own beauty. In fact, at this time, who could know that their future was destruction? Destruction always happened when one was unaware of it. Sumo, that blue star is the central star of the Demon Moon world, right? Yi Wuhui said. Yes. Sumo nodded. According to the star map we saw before, that star's name should be Moon Empress. The 8 stars around it are considered its subsidiary stars. The Demon Moon Empire is on that star. Then let's go directly to the Moon Empress star. Yi Wuhui said. Okay. Sumo nodded. Then, with a thought, the demonic boat flew straight to the Moon Empress star. The Moon Empress star was the central star of the Demon Moon world. It was also the 5th star. Sumo didn't stop at the other 4 stars, because he wanted to find out everything as soon as possible. At this time, Sumo was dressed in black. Her appearance was that of Sumo. When they approached the Moon Empress star, Sumo sensed that there were several rebirth state auras on this star. Those cultivators didn't hide at all. Their auras almost covered the entire Moon Empress star. In fact, if they wanted to, they could completely cover the entire Demon Moon world. What a powerful small world. Sumo couldn't help but raise her eyebrows. It should be known that under normal circumstances, there could only be 2 rebirth state cultivators in a large star area. For example, when the Dani star area was under the control of the Corpse sect, Bushinkong and Busiun were both rebirth state cultivators, while Bu Wuhui looked like a one-life immortal state cultivator. However, she didn't expect that a small world in the Dead Soul Star area would have several rebirth state cultivators. Maybe it was because it had rebirth state cultivators that it finally went to destruction. Yi Wuhui sighed. Haha. Life is hard to predict. Suemo sighed and then took a step forward. His figure disappeared in an instant. When he reappeared, he was already outside a city. That city was surrounded by mountains on 3 sides, and only one side was open. However, that city was extremely magnificent and some parts even reached the sky. If one looked down from the void, the shape of the whole city was like a crescent moon. Moon Capital. That was the capital of the Demon Moon Empire in the Demon Moon world. Sumo's realm was still controlled at the one-life immortal initial stage. At this time, there were many cultivators going in and out of Moon Capital. This Moon Capital didn't have a traditional city gate, because there was no need for one. In front of it were several light curtains, and as long as one passed through the light curtains, one could enter the city. It seems that this is an open city. Yi Wuhui said. There are no restrictions on people coming and going. Yes. Sumo nodded. Indeed. As the two of them spoke, Sumo's figure moved, directly passed through the light curtains, and entered Moon Capital. The moment she passed through the light curtains, Sumo could feel a divine sense sweeping over. However, it was just a simple sweep, and there was nothing unusual. As soon as she entered the city, what came into Sumo's sight was a black tower that reached the sky in the distance. That black tower was the highest point of Moon Capital that she had seen from outside the city. The black tower reached the sky, and the clouds were waist-high. What a tall tower! Yi Wuhui was also surprised. At this time, almost all the cultivators who entered Moon Capital for the first time were looking up at that tower. Chapter 696. The Black Tower. It was the holy land of the entire Moon Imperial Planet and even the entire Demon Moon world. Every year, countless cultivators from the Demon Moon world would come to the Black Tower for a pilgrimage. Sumo had just arrived, so he didn't know much about the situation. At the moment, he only saw many cultivators around him bowing and kowtowing to the Black Tower. Some of them even prostrated on the ground as soon as they entered Moon Capital, and then began to kowtow and move forward. Sumo had seen such a scene in the secular world, but it was the first time he saw it in the cultivation world. There was a main road leading to the Black Tower, all paved with black cobblestones. It was 30 feet wide and uneven, but it was faintly shining. However, the cultivators who were worshipping went straight to the Black Tower, kneeling and kowtowing. There was endless piety on their faces, and even their eyes were shining with the light of expectation. Sumo couldn't help but frown slightly, because he couldn't quite understand this kind of behavior. After all, there were many powerful cultivators among the worshippers. Some were even at the peak of the destroyed sea realm. Why would cultivators at this realm kneel to others like this? They could totally accept the worship of countless living beings. However, in order not to appear too special, Sumo also slightly bowed in the direction of the Black Tower from afar, which could be considered as a courtesy. Worshippers must have something to ask. Yiwuhui sighed. Oh? What do you mean? Sumo said. In fact, whether ordinary people or cultivators, when they worship, they must have something to ask for. Otherwise, why would they worship? Yiwuhui said with a sneer, they just want to get something from a stronger power. But what can a cultivator at the peak of the destroyed sea realm get? Sumo couldn't help but ask. Promotion. Yiwuhui said firmly. Apart from promotion, what else can make a cultivator at the peak of the destroyed sea realm kneel on the ground and kowtow all the way? Hearing Yiwuhui's words, Sumo looked up at the Black Tower again. The Black Tower towered into the clouds, tens of millions of feet high. There were many runes on it, emitting black light. Spiritual power lingered around it like clouds and mist. Sumo could sense that there was a cultivator at the reincarnation realm in the tower, and his level was not low. In terms of level, the cultivator might not be lower than him. From Sumo's place to the Black Tower, even if one didn't count the winding mountain road, there were still hundreds of miles to go. But it was still a long way to go from the tower to the Black Tower. However, if they were to kowtow, it would be a long time. At that moment, a breaking world cultivator happened to pass by Sumo, fellow Taoist. May I ask why they worship the Black Tower? Sumo asked. Oh? The break world cultivator looked at Sumo and was shocked. Friend, you are not a cultivator from Moon King Planet, are you? That's right. Sumo nodded. I just arrived here from another star. No wonder. The breaking world realm cultivator smiled. Tao friend, the thing in front of you is the Demon Moon Holy Land, the Black Moon Tower. What do they want? Sumo said. Then what did they ask for? Sumo asked. The tower said. As long as you can kowtow all the way to the Black Tower, your wish will come true. The break world cultivator sighed and said, if you can kowtow all the way to the Black Tower, your wish will come true. Really? Sumo asked. The tower looked at Sumo with dissatisfaction. But not many people can kowtow all the way to the Black Tower. The break world cultivator looked at Sumo with dissatisfaction. However, not many people are able to kowtow all the way to the Black Tower. Because they can't use any spiritual power, it is not easy to kowtow all the way to the Black Tower. That's because they can't use any magic power at all. Kneeling and kowtowing all the way is not an easy task. Because they can't use any spiritual power, it is not easy to kowtow all the way to the Black Tower. Oh! Sumo was shocked. Why? Although the 100 miles are a bit rough, for a powerful cultivator, their bodies are strong enough. Even if they don't stop, many cultivators should be able to get there. Ha ha! The Break World cultivator shook his head. Friend, try it and you will know. I have kowtowed 3 times, but I didn't succeed. At that time, I was already in the God-burying realm. Everything is not as simple as it looks. On the pilgrimage, we are all mortals. The last words of the tower seemed to have a deeper meaning. Sumo was shocked again. He really wanted to ask that cultivator what exactly was on the path of pilgrimage. However, the cultivator had already left. He didn't care about Sumo anymore. You are a cultivator who doesn't know your limit. I don't want to care about you. Yi Wuhui laughed. Sumo shook her head and smiled bitterly. I have kowtowed 3 times in the God-burying realm, and I still didn't succeed? Sumo said to herself. Then, she looked at the pilgrimage road again. The road looked very ordinary. At that time, there were many cultivators on the road. They were of all levels. The lowest level was in the core formation realm. That meant that even core formation realm cultivators could succeed in the pilgrimage. Theoretically speaking, even a core formation cultivator would be able to rely on their physical body to traverse a mountain path of over 100 miles. But why did that Break World cultivator fail 3 times when he was a graveyard god? Sumo was puzzled. Sumo, why don't you take a walk on the pilgrimage road? Yi Wuhui asked with a smile. Me? Pilgrimage? Kneeling? Sumo sneered in her heart. How is that possible? Since it's impossible, can't we walk forward? Yi Wuhui said impatiently. Why are we standing in front of the city gate? Don't you see that the pilgrims are kneeling, and the non-pilgrims are walking on both sides? All right. Sumo smiled and walked along the 2 sides of the pilgrimage path into the city. Moon Capital was extremely prosperous. Apart from the pilgrimage road, the other roads in the city also extended in all directions. However, Suemo had always been very interested in the pilgrimage path. Hence, he followed the path beside the pilgrimage path and continued forward. There were many cultivators in Moon Capital, but the difference in levels was huge. Sumo even saw many mortals. This was a rare situation. In a high-grade immortal city, it was rare to see mortals and immortals living together. This was the first time Sumo saw such a scene in the Izong world. However, the entire Moon Capital was very peaceful, and there was not even a hint of killing intent. The cultivators here, regardless of their levels, could get along peacefully. For them, realms seemed to be just a symbol, and there was no difference in essence. Along the way, Sumo met a few cultivators whose realms were lower than his. However, when they talked to each other, they only called Sumo fellow Taoist. In their eyes, everything seemed to be equal. This was something that was absolutely unimaginable in the outside world of cultivators. The Demon Moon world indeed had its own uniqueness. At this time, Sumo walked to the door of a shop. There was a long table at the door of the shop. There were many spiritual talismans on the long table. And one of the spiritual talismans caught Sumo's attention. Because that spiritual talisman had the word Huang written on it, and there was an extra stroke below it. Chapter 697. The Black Tower. It was the holy land of the entire Moon Imperial Planet and even the entire Demon Moon world. Every year, countless cultivators from the Demon Moon world would come to the Black Tower for a pilgrimage. Sumo had just arrived, so he didn't know much about the situation. At the moment, he only saw many cultivators around him bowing and kowtowing to the Black Tower. Some of them even prostrated on the ground as soon as they entered Moon Capital, and then began to kowtow and move forward. Sumo had seen such a scene in the secular world, but it was the first time he had seen it in the cultivation world. There was a main road leading to the Black Tower, all paved with black cobblestones. It was 3 feet wide and uneven, but it was faintly shining. However, the cultivators who were worshipping went straight to the Black Tower step by step, kneeling and kowtowing. There was endless piety on their faces, and even their eyes were shining with the light of expectation. Sumo couldn't help but frown slightly, because he couldn't quite understand this kind of behavior. After all, there were many powerful cultivators among the worshippers. Some were even at the peak of the destroyed sea realm. Why would cultivators at this realm kneel to others like this? They could totally accept the worship of countless creatures. However, in order not to look too special, Sumo also bowed slightly in the direction of the Black Tower from a distance. Worshippers must have something to ask. Yi Wuhui sighed. Oh? What do you mean? Sumo said. In fact, whether ordinary people or cultivators, when they worship, they must have something in their hearts. Otherwise, why would they worship? Yi Wuhui said with a sneer, they just want to get something from a stronger power. But what can a cultivator at the peak of the destroyed sea realm get? Sumo couldn't help but ask. Promotion? Yi Wuhui said firmly. Apart from promotion, what else can make a cultivator at the peak of the destroyed sea realm kneel on the ground and kowtow all the way? After hearing Yi Wuhui's words, Sumo looked up at the Black Tower again. The Black Tower towered into the clouds, tens of millions of feet high. There were many runes on it, emitting a black glow. Spiritual energy lingered around it like clouds. Sumo could sense that there was a rebirth realm cultivator guarding the pagoda, and his level was not low either. In terms of rank, that cultivator might not be inferior to him. From Sumo's place to the Black Tower, even if one didn't count the winding mountain road, there were still hundreds of miles to go. Of course, this distance was nothing to cultivators who rode on the wind. However, if they were to kowtow, it would be a long time. At that moment, a breaking world cultivator passed by Sumo. Fellow Taoist, may I ask why they worship the Black Tower? Sumo asked. The breaking world cultivator looked at Sumo and was surprised. Friend, you are not a cultivator from the Moon King planet, are you? That's right. Sumo nodded. I just came here from another star. No wonder. The breaking world realm cultivator smiled. Tao friend, the thing in front of you is the Demon Moon Holy Land, the Black Moon Tower. Every year, there are countless cultivators who come here to worship. What do they ask for? Sumo said. They can ask for anything. The breaking world cultivator sighed. As long as you can kowtow all the way to the Black Tower, your wish will come true. Really? Sumo asked. Of course. The breaking world cultivator looked at Sumo with dissatisfaction. However, not many people can really kowtow all the way to the Black Tower. Most people can't do it. Because they can't use any spiritual power, it is not easy to kowtow all the way. Moreover, once they start to kowtow, they can't stop until they reach the Black Tower. Sumo was shocked. Why? Although the 100 miles are a bit rough, for a powerful cultivator, their bodies are strong enough. Even if they don't stop, many cultivators should be able to reach it. Hee. The breaking world cultivator shook his head. Friend, try it and you will know. I kowtowed 3 times, but I didn't succeed. At that time, I was already in the God-burying tier. Everything is not as simple as it looks. On the pilgrimage road, we are all ordinary people. The breaking world cultivator's last words seemed to have a deeper meaning. Sumo was shocked again. She really wanted to ask the cultivator what was on the pilgrimage road. However, the cultivator had already floated away. He didn't care about Sumo anymore. Yi Wuhui laughed. You are a cultivator who doesn't know your limit. I don't want to care about you. Sumo shook her head and smiled bitterly. I kowtowed 3 times in the God-burying tier, and I didn't succeed? Sumo said to herself. Then, she looked at the pilgrimage road. That road looked really ordinary. At that time, there were many cultivators on the road. They were of all levels. The lowest level was the core formation tier. It meant that even core formation tier cultivators could succeed in the pilgrimage. Theoretically, even core formation tier cultivators could rely on their bodies to walk over 100 miles of mountain road. However, why did the breaking world cultivator, who was in the god-burying tier, fail 3 times? Sumo didn't understand. Sumo, why don't you walk on the pilgrimage road? Yi Wuhui asked with a smile. Me? Pilgrimage? Kneel? Sumo sneered. How is that possible? Since it's impossible, can't we walk forward? Yi Wuhui said grumpily. Why are we standing at the gate of the city like a fool? Don't you see that the pilgrims are kneeling? Those who are not pilgrims are walking on both sides of the road? Okay. Sumo smiled. Then, she walked along the 2 sides of the pilgrimage road into the city. Moon Capital was very prosperous. Apart from the pilgrimage road, the other roads in the city also extended in all directions. However, Sumo had always been interested in the pilgrimage road. So, he walked along the road beside the pilgrimage road. There were many cultivators in Moon Capital, but the difference in levels was huge. Sumo even saw many mortals. This was a rare situation. In a high-level immortal city, it was rare to see mortals and immortals living together. It was Sumo's first time seeing this in the Izang world. However, the entire Moon Capital was very peaceful. There wasn't even any murderous aura. The cultivators here, no matter what level, could get along with each other peacefully. For them, realms were just a symbol. There was no essential difference. Along the way, Sumo met a few cultivators whose realms were lower than his. However, when they talked to each other, they only called Sumo fellow Taoist. In their eyes, everything was equal. This was something that was absolutely unimaginable to the outside world of cultivators. The Demon Moon world had its own unique features. At this time, Sumo walked to the door of a shop. There was a long table in front of the shop. There were many spiritual talismans on the long table. One of the spiritual talismans caught Sumo's attention. Because that spiritual talisman had the word Huang written on it. Moreover, there was an extra stroke below the word. Chapter 698. Desolation? Special desolation. Sumo, look. Yi Wuhui also noticed the desolation character and reminded Sumo. Sumo walked to the long table and gently picked up the desolation character talisman. The spiritual power on the talisman was fluctuating, but it was not particularly strong. It seemed that it was not a particularly high-level talisman. However, Sumo felt that this talisman was special. Dear customer, how many talismans do you want? At this time, a cultivator who looked like a shop assistant walked out of the shop. How much is this talisman? Sumo asked. Protective talisman. The shop assistant glanced at the talisman in Sumo's hand. Each talisman costs 1 mid-grade spirit stone. Protective talisman? 1 mid-grade spirit stone for one? Sumo could not help but be slightly surprised when he heard this. This talisman with the desolation character on it was actually a so-called protective talisman that could be bought for 1 mid-grade spirit stone? This was a little different from what Sumo had imagined. Hey, dear customer, if you are free, then buy a few more. I will give you the lowest price. The shop assistant reached into his pocket and took out hundreds of protective talismans. Sumo's face darkened. Was this desolation character so common? Yi Wuhui laughed. Sumo, it seems that we have misjudged you. We have plenty of these talismans. Sumo did not expect such a situation. Dear customer, just buy more. If you are on a pilgrimage, you can use it on the road. If you are not on a pilgrimage, it can also ensure your safety. My family's protective talismans are second to none in the entire Moon Capital. The shop assistant began to peddle. Originally, Sumo wanted to put down the talismans and leave. However, at this time, a few cultivators suddenly came and said, "Shop assistant, give me 10 protective talismans." Alright. The shop assistant quickly ordered 10 protective talismans and took 10 mid-grade spirit stones from them. However, the 10 mid-grade spirit stones were not the same as what Sumo had. In terms of quality, it seemed a little lacking. The few cultivators took the talismans and went on a pilgrimage. Sumo couldn't help but raise her eyebrows. Then, she turned to the shop assistant and asked, "Buddy, is this protective talisman really useful on the pilgrimage?" "Huh." Hearing Sumo's question, the shop assistant couldn't help but look at Sumo as if she was an idiot. "I'm a foreign cultivator who just entered the city," Sumo could only explain. When the shop assistant heard this, he nodded slowly and then said in an extremely solemn manner, "Sir, this protective talisman can save your life on the pilgrimage." "Protect your life on the pilgrimage?" Sumo asked doubtfully. "Why? Is there any danger to your life on this pilgrimage?" "Sigh." The waiter sighed and nodded. "Sir, you are an outsider, so you might not know. Every year, there are many cultivators who die on this pilgrimage." "Oh? Why?" Sumo asked. "The pilgrimage looks ordinary, but in fact, it is filled with dangers." The waiter looked at the black road in front of him with a somewhat complicated expression. "On the pilgrimage, it's either life or death. If it's really an ordinary road, why is it called the pilgrimage?" "I'd like to hear the details," Sumo said modestly. At the same time, he took out 10 middle-grade spirit stones from his bosom. "Give me 10 first." When the waiter saw that Sumo bought the talismans first, he was naturally happy. Moreover, the spirit stones that Sumo took out were of excellent quality. Thus, he kept the spirit stones, tapped on the talismans, and started to talk. "Sir, seeing that you are an outsider, I'll tell you about the pilgrimage." The waiter said, "To be honest, I'm afraid that not many people in the city can tell how long this pilgrimage has been around for." "First there's the pilgrimage, then there's the moon capital?" Sumo asked. "That's right," the waiter said. "It's said that before the moon capital, there was already a pilgrimage. It leads directly to the Black Moon Tower. As for when the Black Moon Tower appeared, there's no way to prove it. On the Moon Emperor planet, there's only a rumor that the Black Moon Tower and the Moon Emperor coexisted. It's said that when the Moon Emperor planet was formed, the Black Moon Tower already existed." "Who lives in the Black Moon Tower?" Sumo asked. "Of course, it's the royal family of the Demon Moon." The waiter looked at the Black Moon Tower, his eyes filled with admiration. "The royal family of the Demon Moon is the greatest existence in the Demon Moon world. Without the royal family of the Demon Moon, there wouldn't be the Moon Emperor planet, let alone the Demon Moon world. Then why is it dangerous to worship the Black Moon Tower?" Sumo asked. "AI." The waiter sighed, "Because of greed." "Greed?" Sumo was a little confused. Originally, only the people of the Moon Capital were allowed to pay their respects on this pilgrimage. At first, they just wanted to express their respect and gratitude to the royal family of the Demon Moon. However, all the cultivators who came back from the pilgrimage received different benefits. "What benefits?" Sumo asked. "Promotion? Magic treasures? Cultivation techniques? Even their wishes were fulfilled," the waiter said, "but they didn't know who gave them to them. So," the waiter paused for a moment. "So, 1 spread to 10, 10 spread to 100. Sumo smiled. After that, not only did people from the Moon Capital come to worship, but the entire Moon Emperor planet also came to worship. Even the cultivators of the entire Demon Moon world swarmed over, right?" "That's right." The waiter smiled helplessly. "Dear customer, I don't think you came to worship." "No." Sumo nodded. The waiter looked at Sumo and smiled. "That's right." Nowadays, almost no one from the Moon Capital goes to worship, because we really admire the royal family of the Demon Moon from the bottom of our hearts. And the waiter coldly glanced at the cultivators who were on the pilgrimage path. "They all have something to ask for. Are they really grateful and in awe of the royal family of the Demon Moon?" The waiter withdrew his gaze. "I don't think so." "Hee." Yiwuhui couldn't help but laugh. "Sumo, this young man is insightful." "So, the royal family of the Demon Moon set up obstacles on the pilgrimage path? Sumo asked again. Yes. The waiter nodded. This is not a secret. What we see now is not the time when the number of pilgrims is the highest. It is said that the pilgrimage path in front of us used to be overcrowded. Many pilgrims, in order to fight for a path, fought fiercely and were badly injured. So, later, the royal family of the Demon Moon took action and set up obstacles on this pilgrimage path. Those pilgrims with bad intentions were screened out, and some even died on the pilgrimage path. What obstacles? Sumo asked. It is said that it is a formation, an illusion. Moreover, everyone encounters it differently. The waiter said, nowadays, the number of cultivators who can pass through the pilgrimage path is less than 1 in 100. Then, what about these protective talismans? Sumo said. The royal family of the Demon Moon is merciful. The waiter said, although there are obstacles on the pilgrimage path, they can't completely stop the pilgrims. Once they step on the pilgrimage path, they will either die or die. Later, the royal family of the Demon Moon distributed these protective talismans. Each protective talisman can protect the pilgrims from death once. However, any cultivator can only do it 3 times at most. If a cultivator walks on the pilgrimage path 3 times and still goes on the 4th time, then there is a high probability that he will die on the pilgrimage path. So, the protective talisman is also called the pilgrimage talisman. The waiter smiled bitterly. So, these talismans all come from the Black Moon Tower? Sumo said. That's right. The waiter laughed. Every talisman is sent out from the Black Moon Tower. We are just helping to distribute them, and at the same time earn some spirit stones. Just now, when I told you to buy more, unless you give it to someone, it is useless. Sumo nodded thoughtfully. Chapter 699. Protective Talisman? Pilgrimage Talisman? After listening to the shop assistant's words, Sumo was skeptical. Everything the shop assistant said seemed to make sense, but it always gave people a strange feeling. There seemed to be something unfathomable behind the pilgrimage and the Demon Moon royal family. Sumo, I'm afraid it's not that simple, Yi Wuhui said. Sumo nodded in her heart. Her feeling was basically the same as Yi Wuhui's. Who in the Demon Moon royal family made these protective talismans? Sumo asked the shop assistant. Customer, I don't know. I haven't even entered the Demon Moon royal palace. How would I know who made them? Every once in a while, there would be a cultivator who would send the talismans over. The shop assistant said. The Demon Moon royal palace is under the Black Moon Tower? Sumo said. That's right. The shop assistant said, Customer, you don't want to go on pilgrimage, but you might as well go to the periphery of the Demon Moon royal palace. The scenery there is not bad, it's one of the sights of the Moon capital. However, the Demon Moon royal palace is a forbidden area, you absolutely cannot enter. Unless you walk on the pilgrimage road and kowtow all the way. Good. Thank you, brother. Sumo cupped her hands at the shop assistant and didn't ask any more questions. Then, she put away the protective talismans and continued to walk along the road. At this time, the cultivators on the pilgrimage road were still kowtowing. Sumo, are you going to enter the Demon Moon Royal City? Yi Wuhui asked with a smile. Sumo laughed. What do you think? We're all here, of course we have to go in and take a look. Yi Wuhui said. That's right. Sumo laughed. The story the shop assistant told me is a bit strange. I want to see if the Demon Moon royal family is really as benevolent as the shop assistant said. What kind of existence is the Black Moon Tower? And this desolate talisman, who wrote it? Is this enough for us to go in and take a look? Good. Sumo, I support you. Yi Wuhui said happily. Then let's enter the palace. You seem to be very excited. Sumo talked with Yi Wuhui through divine sense as they walked. Of course. Yi Wuhui said. Why? Sumo asked. Because I've never been out of the palace. Yi Wuhui said, I haven't even been to a mortal's palace, let alone a cultivator's palace. Sumo was speechless. What kind of reason was that? Why? Have you been to the cultivator palace before? Yi Wuhui asked. In my previous life, my Murong body was a prince of the Murong dynasty. Sumo sighs, actually. I think whether it's a mortal palace or a cultivator's palace, there must be something inside. What? Yi Wuhui asked curiously. Loneliness. Sumo suddenly stopped in his tracks. He looked at the Black Moon Tower from afar and slowly said, Don't you feel that the black tower that stands between the heavens and the earth, looking down on everything, is extremely lonely? Yi Wuhui seemed to be stunned for a moment, then he smiled lightly. Now that you mention it, it does look a little lonely. However, I always thought that the palace was extremely luxurious and lively. I didn't expect you to say that it would be lonely in the palace. Luxurious is definitely luxurious, but I'm afraid that liveliness will never appear in the palace. The pinnacle of power is often lonely. Sumo sighed. At that moment, he thought of his past self. The Dark Lord was insufferably arrogant, but not many people could understand his loneliness. Yi Wuhui seemed to feel Sumo's state of mind, so he obediently didn't say anything. Sumo continued to walk in the direction of the Black Moon Tower. 100 miles was nothing to a cultivator. However, Sumo found that as the pilgrimage continued, there were fewer and fewer cultivators on the road. On the roadside, cultivators kept kneeling and crawling out of the pilgrimage. Their faces were pale, and in their hands were the remnants of a spirit talisman that had been burned. Needless to say, those were the so-called protective talismans. Those cultivators looked in the direction of the Black Tower with empty eyes. At that moment, no one knew what they were thinking. Moreover, most of them rested for more than 2 hours before they slowly got up. They looked extremely tired, both physically and mentally, and then they all left without saying a word. The people of the Moon Capital seemed to be familiar with such a scene, so their reaction was even colder. Sumo, it seems that guy was right. Only 1 in 100 miles can pass this pilgrimage. Yi Wuhui said. Yes. If it was easy, there would be no need for pilgrimage, Sumo said. Sumo walked for another 10 miles, and what she saw and heard was almost the same. At this time, according to the time of the Moon Imperial Planet, it was already noon. Thus, Sumo found a decent-sized inn on the side of the road and stayed there. These past few days, Sumo had been on the move, so he wanted to take a break. In the inn, Sumo set up a barrier and released the little white pig and the black feather god Hong. Yi Wuhui made a move in her mind and walked out of his sea of consciousness. 2 people and 2 beasts stayed in the inn, waiting for dusk. The night of the Moon Imperial Planet was a little later than Sumo had expected. However, the night of the Moon Imperial Planet was very special. There were 8 moons in the void. 8 stars twined in the night sky. Together, they formed the shape of a crescent moon, but each had a different color. They set off each other, giving off a faint light. The night sky of the Moon Imperial Planet was very beautiful. Sumo, what a beautiful night sky! Yi Wuhui held the little white pig in his arms, leaned against the window, and said quietly. At that moment, under the moonlight, Yi Wuhui's soul looked like a dream. The little white pig was lying comfortably in Yi Wuhui's arms. It seemed that the embrace of the soul made it very comfortable. The black feather god Hong stood proudly in the corner of the room. He closed his eyes and stood on one leg. He had no interest in the so-called moonlight night. Sitting cross-legged on the bed, Sumo gently opened her eyes. Miss Yi, did you really travel to many worlds with Bu Miaotian? Of course. Yi Wuhui was a little confused by Sumo's question. Then why do you look like you've never seen anything? Sumo said lightly. This kind of night is not rare in the Yizong world, is it? Yi Wuhui couldn't help but frown. Then, he turned around and said to Sumo, Sumo, haven't you heard of a saying? What saying? Sumo asked. It's not about the distance, it's about where to go. It's not about where to go, it's about who you are with. Why don't you understand the thoughts of a girl? The little white pig in Yi Wuhui's arms hummed in agreement. The black feather god Hong opened his eyes, as if he was glaring fiercely at the little white pig. Seeing this, the little white pig hurriedly hid his head in Yi Wuhui's arms. Sumo laughed helplessly, but didn't reply. Actually, it wasn't that he didn't understand. It was just that he didn't want to understand Yi Wuhui too much. Yi Wuhui sighed softly, then turned around and continued to look at the night. And at this moment, between the 8 moons, a strange red light suddenly lit up, and then went straight to the Black Moon Tower. That brilliance was like a giant bat. At that moment, a strange aura spread out from Moon Capital. Bloodbat? Inside Moon Capital, someone exclaimed. Sumo couldn't help but frown slightly. Chapter 700. The Demon Moon Imperial Palace was a forbidden area for the people of Moon Capital. There was only one way to enter the Demon Moon Imperial Palace. That was the pilgrimage path. In fact, the entire Demon Moon Imperial Palace was surrounded by array restrictions, and they were all reincarnation level restrictions. Even ordinary reincarnation level cultivators would not be able to enter. Ordinary cultivators would not be able to see or touch these spirit formations. However, Sumo was not an ordinary cultivator. Her knowledge was enough for her to enter the Demon Moon Imperial Palace as if she was walking on flat ground. Gently lifting her foot, Sumo took a step to the left and passed through the protective array of the Demon Moon Imperial Palace. It was completely silent. However, at that moment, Sumo felt as if she had passed through an invisible water curtain. Hua! The gentle sound of flowing water echoed in her ears. Immediately, what appeared in front of Sumo was a world that was completely different from the safety she saw before. What came into view was an extremely spacious square. It had a circumference of hundreds of feet. On the other side of the square was an extremely majestic palace. The palace was black, and there were dozens of steps leading to the palace. This was something that could not be seen from the outside of the palace. Here, there were no so-called undulating mountain ranges, and there were no colorful lights either. The only similarity was that behind the palace, there was a black pagoda. However, that black pagoda was definitely not as tall as it was in Moon Capital. The so-called Tower of the Black Moon was actually only 1,000 feet tall. Empty, lonely, and without any signs of life. That was the first impression that this place gave people. Sumo, this Demon Moon Imperial Palace is actually wrapped in an illusion technique? Yi Wuhui was a little surprised. Yes. Sumo nodded her head lightly. The inside and outside of the palace are 2 different worlds. This place was set up by a reincarnation level cultivator. What the people of Moon Capital see is just an illusion. This place is really lonely. Yi Wuhui sighed. In Sumo's sea of consciousness, she could feel the loneliness and oppression of the Demon Moon Imperial Palace. That mother and son pair have disappeared, Yi Wuhui said again. Sumo turned her gaze to the palace gate, which should correspond to the direction where the mother and son pair entered. However, it was completely empty. There was nothing there. The mother and son pair seemed to have disappeared. At this moment, Sumo's technique enveloped his whole body. He did not spread out his divine sense, because he had to first hide himself. After all, there were reincarnation-level cultivators in the Demon Moon Imperial Palace. Although Sumo and Yi Wuhui were the holy land of the Demon Moon world, there was no life here. The Demon Moon Imperial Palace is the holy land of the entire Demon Moon world, but there is no sign of life. Everything here formed a strong contrast with the moonlight capital outside. Dang, clang, moon. At this moment, an extremely heavy bell sound came from within the Black Palace. The sound of the bell seemed to have come from an extremely distant past as it suddenly reverberated. Long bell 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 bell. Suemo couldn't help but be slightly startled. He instinctively took a step back. Palace, in an instant, along with the sound of the bell, the originally dim square suddenly lit up with countless lights. Those lights were lit up from the ground in the middle of the square. Each of the lamps had a diameter of 3 feet. Their flames leaped about, looking somewhat demonic. They were like red lotuses in hell, yet they were also like bloodthirsty, dancing girls in red. Huang! Yi Wuhui said in alarm. That's right. Those blood-red lights formed an extra, desolate, character in the center of the square. Suemo furrowed his brows. At this moment, he was hidden in a shadow in the corner of the palace, like a ghost spying on everything. Ku mi ma ku, as the lights lit up, the ringing of the bells in the palace gradually stopped, but an inexplicable chanting sound rang out. At that moment, there seemed to be many cultivators gathered together, singing a special ancient scripture. What scripture is that? Sumo asked. Never heard of it. Yi Wuhui answered. Ku mi ku. The chanting gradually became louder and louder, like streams converging into an ocean. Waves tens of millions of zhang tall rose layer by layer, unstoppable. Creak. The black palace gate, which was dozens of zhang tall, slowly opened. Then 2 rows of cultivators in black robes came out. They all wore long black robes that completely covered their heads and faces. They bowed, and each of them held a paper lantern in their hands. They were all God-bearing realm cultivators. They were all chanting the ancient scripture. Behind them were 2 rows of cultivators in white robes. They also covered their heads and faces, and their bodies were also bowed. However, in their hands were paper lanterns that emitted green light. They were all world-breaking realm cultivators. The green and red contrasted each other, and it was quite strange. The 2 groups of cultivators were rushing forward with small steps. Then, they stood in 2 circles around the desolate character in the center of the square. They did not stop chanting, and they were very rhythmic. Sumo, they seemed to be performing some kind of mysterious ritual, Yi Wuhui said. Yes. Sumo gently nodded. Suddenly, the pitch of their voices rose sharply. The palace glowed brightly, and then 2 rows of cultivators in red robes walked out. There were a total of 18 of them. They also covered their heads and faces, but they did not carry lanterns. They were Sea Destruction Realm cultivators. Such a formation of cultivators was enough to show how powerful the Demon Moon world was. The Sea Annihilation Realm cultivators bowed, holding all kinds of Dharma artifacts. Sumo had never seen those artifacts before, but one of them caught Sumo's attention. The plum blossom staff. Sumo's eyes narrowed. Because that was not Wu Er's plum blossom staff, but from the looks of it, it was almost identical. That plum blossom staff was obviously a replica of the real one. These 18 cultivators did not form a circle like the black and white cultivators before. Instead, they lined up at the bottom of the Black Palace's step. There were more cultivators behind? Sumo and Yi Wuhui did not say anything. Everything in front of them was enough to shock them. Ku mi hum, all the cultivators were chanting the incantation. Looking again, 4 cultivators slowly walked out of the Black Palace's doors. The 4 cultivators were all wearing silver robes. They shone with dazzling silver light. What shocked Sumo the most was that the 4 of them were carrying a black coffin. At that moment, Suemo could not help but frown. The coffin was a very sensitive existence to Sumo. The black coffin was covered with all kinds of runes, but those runes did not belong to the 3 realms. It was not a coffin from the 3 realms. Of course, it was not one of the 9 coffins. The silver-robed cultivators were all one-lifetime immortal realm cultivators, and all of them were in the late stage. They did not bow, but they all wore silver masks. From their exposed eyes, it could be seen that they were extremely solemn. They carried the coffin, their footsteps firm and steady as they headed straight for the Desolation Lantern Array. Chapter 701. Blood bat. Yi Wuhui also heard someone exclaiming outside the inn. Let's go out and take a look, Sumo said. Then, he waved his hand and took back the little white pig and the black feather god. Yi Wuhui also returned to Sumo's sea of consciousness. Then, Sumo stepped out of the inn and went to the courtyard of the inn. At this time, there were many cultivators standing in the courtyard of the inn. They had all noticed the abnormality in the night sky and were discussing with each other. Fellow cultivator, what just flew across the void? Sumo asked a cultivator next to her. It seems to be a blood bat. That cultivator was in the middle stage of the breaking realm. At this moment, his eyes were slightly furrowed as if he was thinking about something. It seemed that he was also not too sure. Several cultivators around him basically had the same expression. What is a blood bat? Sumo asked again. It is a kind of demon bat in the Dead Soul Star region. Its magic power is strong and it wanders among the stars. It specializes in feeding on the blood of cultivators or dead souls. It is said that there is only one blood bat in the entire demon moon world. Only one blood bat? Sumo frowned. Is it raised by the demon moon royal family? Yes. The breaking realm cultivator nodded. The demon moon royal family did raise one. However, it should not have run out of the palace. That blood bat has been imprisoned in the Black Moon Tower by the royal family. However, the shadow and aura just now are exactly the same as the legendary blood bat. There's an 80 to 90% chance that it's that monster. Another cultivator chimed in. AI. There were other cultivators who let out long sighs. Sumo did not ask any more questions, because no one dared to be sure. At this time, the red shadow in the void had completely disappeared under the Black Moon Tower. That strange aura also disappeared. Sumo, let's enter the palace, Yi Wuhui said. Let's see what is going on. Humph. Hung, who was in the storage bag, actually agreed softly. Alright. Sumo nodded without hesitation. Immediately after, he took a step forward and headed straight for the Demon Moon Palace from the inn. Sigh. Blood bats were undead creatures. The Break World cultivator looked in the direction of the Black Moon Tower and shook his head. He sighed. Now that the moon has appeared, it is a very bad sign. When he turned his head, he seemed to want to say a few words to Sumo, but he found that Sumo, who had just spoken to him, had already disappeared without a trace. Elite. The Break World cultivator had a wry smile, but he did not care. It was not surprising that there were hidden dragons and crouching tigers in the Demon Moon world. At this moment, many of the surrounding cultivators wore solemn expressions. That was because the Break World cultivator hadn't told Sumo that hundreds of thousands of years ago, blood bats had appeared on a moonlit night. That had led to a catastrophe on the Moon King planet. Blood bats were ominous to the demonic moon world. Demon Moon royal family. They were the most ancient and powerful race in the entire Demon Moon world. Their history no one could explain clearly. However, they had ruled the Demon Moon world for tens of thousands of years. At this time, Sumo was standing outside the Demon Moon Palace. Just as the shop assistant had said, the Demon Moon Palace was a beautiful place in Moontown. It was actually located on a big mountain. The people of Moontown called the Moon King Mountain. No one knew whether the Moon King planet got its name from the mountain, or whether the mountain got its name from the Moon King planet. The Demon Moon Palace was built on the mountain. It was very spectacular. The night of the Moon King planet was intoxicating. At this time, the Demon Moon Palace was brightly lit. The colors were blurred, and it was endlessly gorgeous. Sumo, the scenery here is so beautiful, Yi Wuhui complimented. Thinking about what Yi Wuhui had said in the inn, Sumo smiled and did not respond. Perhaps, as long as Sumo was there, Yi Wuhui would see everything as beautiful. At the foot of the mountain, the pilgrimage road was like a snake. However, there were not many Demon Moon cultivators who could get there. Although there were few, there were still some. At this moment, The one closest to the Demon Moon Palace was a woman. She was accompanied by a boy of 7 or 8 years old. It seemed that they were a mother and a son. The woman was dressed in a plain cotton dress, and her appearance was ordinary. The boy was also wearing plain clothes which were patched. The boy's face was not good. It was white and yellow, as if he was seriously ill. His body was thin, and his clothes were very loose. Mortals! Sumo could not help but be stunned. Because there was no fluctuation of spiritual chi on the woman and the child. Sumo was sure that they were definitely not cultivators of a higher level, but mortals. At the same time, Sumo saw that the knees of the woman and the child had been worn out. Their trousers were stained with coagulated blood, and their knees were rotten and bloody. Their movements were extremely slow. Every movement of kneeling seemed to exhaust the last of their strength. However, their eyes were very firm. It was hard to imagine how they worshipped for more than 100 miles on the pilgrimage road with their mortal bodies. "Mother, we're almost there," the little boy said. "The woman nodded gently. "Schwanger, we're almost there. We can't stop on the pilgrimage road. Hold on a little longer, okay?" And the little boy smiled. "Mother, I know. I'm fine, I can hold on. When we reach the palace, will my illness be cured?" "Definitely." The woman smiled knowingly, and then touched the little boy's head. "The Demon Moon royal family will grant all requests. Your illness will definitely be cured." "Good." The little boy smiled. "Mother, I'm cured, I want to eat meat buns." "Good. Mother will definitely make the best meat buns for you." Although the mother and daughter were talking, their movements did not stop. They crawled on their knees, step by step, extremely pious. On the pilgrimage road, they left their blood stains. However, when they walked 3 feet away, the blood stains disappeared automatically. The blood stains had all melted into the black cobblestones. "Sumo, what's wrong with that boy?" Yi Wuhui said. "It's a mortal's illness in an immortal city. Does he still need to walk the pilgrimage road to seek help from the palace?" "That boy doesn't seem to be ill." Sumo also frowned. "His physique seems to be a little weak, but I can't see any other problems." "You're right. Not to mention that there are great cultivators everywhere in Moon Capital. A mortal's illness can be cured. Even a child cultivator might be able to cure him. This matter is indeed strange." What's even more strange is that so many great cultivators withdrew midway. They're a pair of mortals, yet they're about to enter the palace? Yi Wuhui said again. "Perhaps their minds are pure, and they don't have inner demons," Sumo guessed. At this time, not far behind the mother and son was an old man. Peak Sea Destruction Realm. That old man's realm could be said to be extremely high. There was not a trace of injury on his body, and his movements were quite agile. He was the one who had the highest realm of pilgrimage that Sumo had seen during the day. Relatively speaking, his physical body was unparalleled. However, the mother and son were already close to the palace gate, so he could not catch up. "Sumo, they're going in," Yi Wuhui said. Looking again, at the end of the pilgrimage road, there was a round platform. The mother and son had just stepped onto the round platform, and immediately disappeared. "Let's go." Sumo narrowed her eyes. The palace was surrounded by Dharma formations. However, how could they stop Sumo? Sumo silently recited a spell, and took a step forward. Chapter 702. The Demon Moon Imperial Palace was a forbidden area for the people of Moon Capital. There was only one way to enter the Demon Moon Imperial Palace. That was the pilgrimage path. In fact, the entire Demon Moon Imperial Palace was surrounded by array restrictions, and they were all reincarnation level restrictions. Even ordinary reincarnation level cultivators would not be able to enter. Ordinary cultivators would not be able to see or touch these spirit formations. However, Sumo was not an ordinary cultivator. Her knowledge was enough for her to enter the Demon Moon Imperial Palace as if she was walking on flat ground. Gently lifting her foot, Sumo took a step to the left and passed through the protective array of the Demon Moon Imperial Palace. It was completely silent. However, at that moment, Sumo felt as if she had passed through an invisible water curtain. Hua! The gentle sound of flowing water echoed in her ears. Immediately, what appeared in front of Sumo was a world that was completely different from the safety she saw before. What came into view was an extremely spacious square. It had a circumference of hundreds of feet. On the other side of the square was an extremely majestic palace. The palace was black, and there were dozens of steps leading to the palace. This was something that could not be seen from the outside of the palace. Here, there were no mountain ranges at all, nor were there any colorful lights. The only similarity was that behind the palace, there was a black pagoda. However, that black pagoda was definitely not as tall as it was in Moon Capital. The so-called Black Pagoda was actually only hundreds of feet tall. Empty, lonely, and without any signs of life. That was the first impression that this place gave people. Sumo, this Demon Moon Imperial Palace is actually wrapped in an illusion technique? Yi Wuhui was a little surprised. Yes. Sumo nodded her head lightly. The inside and outside of the palace are two different worlds. This place was set up by a reincarnation-level cultivator. What the people of Moon Capital see is just an illusion. This place is really lonely. Yi Wuhui sighed. In Sumo's sea of consciousness, she could feel the loneliness and oppression of the Demon Moon Imperial Palace. That mother and son pair have disappeared, Yi Wuhui said again. Sumo turned her gaze to the gate of the Imperial Palace, which should correspond to the direction where the mother and son on the pilgrimage had entered. However, it was empty. There was nothing there. The mother and son seemed to have disappeared. At this time, Sumo's technique enveloped her entire body. His divine sense did not spread out, because he had to conceal himself first. After all, there were rebirth realm cultivators in the Demon Moon Palace. Although Sumo and Yi Wuhui were mentally prepared, everything here was beyond their imagination. The Demon Moon Imperial Palace is the holy land of the entire Demon Moon world, but there is no sign of life. Everything here formed a strong contrast with the moonlight capital outside. Ding, ding, hum. At this moment, an extremely heavy bell sound came from within the Black Palace. The sound of the bell seemed to have come from an extremely distant past as it suddenly reverberated. Distant, long, and ancient. Suemo couldn't help but be slightly startled. He instinctively took a step back. Whoosh! In an instant, following the sound of the bell, the originally dim square suddenly lit up with countless lights. Those lights were lit up from the ground in the middle of the square. Each of the lights had a diameter of 3 feet. Their flames danced, somewhat bewitching. They were like red lotuses from hell and also like bloodthirsty, dancing girls in red. Desolation! Yi Wuhui exclaimed. That's right. Those blood-red lights formed an additional desolation character in the middle of the square. Sumo's brows were tightly knitted. At this time, he was hiding in a shadow in the corner of the palace, like a spying ghost. Ku mi ma ku. As the lights lit up, the bell sound in the palace gradually stopped, but an indescribable chanting sound could be heard. At that moment, it seemed that many cultivators had gathered together and were singing a special ancient scripture. What scripture is that? Sumo asked. Never heard of it. Yi Wuhui answered. Ku mi ku. The chanting sound gradually became louder, like a small stream converging into an ocean. Tens of millions of feet of waves rose layer by layer, unstoppable. Creak! The dozens of feet tall black palace gate slowly opened. Then 2 rows of cultivators in black robes came out. They were all wearing long black robes that completely covered their heads and faces. They were hunched over, and each of them held a paper lantern in their hands. They were all God-bearing realm cultivators. They were all chanting the ancient scripture. Behind them were 2 rows of cultivators in white robes. They also covered their heads and faces, and they were also hunched over. However, in their hands were paper lanterns that emitted green light. They were all world-breaking realm cultivators. The green and red contrasted each other, and it was quite strange. The 2 groups of cultivators were hurrying forward with small steps. Then, they stood in 2 circles around the desolation, character in the middle of the square. Their chanting did not stop, and it was very rhythmic. Sumo, they seemed to be performing some kind of mysterious ritual, Yi Wuhui said. Yes. Sumo gently nodded. Suddenly, the pitch of their voices rose. The palace glowed brightly, and then 2 rows of cultivators in red robes walked out. There were a total of 18 of them. They also covered their heads and faces, but they did not carry lanterns. They were Sea Destruction Realm cultivators. Such a formation of cultivators was enough to show how powerful the Demon Moon world was. The Sea Destruction Realm cultivators bowed over, holding all kinds of ritual implements. Sumo had never seen those ritual implements before, but one of them caught Sumo's attention. A plum blossom staff. Sumo could not help but narrow her eyes. It was not Wu Er's plum blossom staff, but it looked almost the same. That plum blossom staff was clearly a replica of the real plum blossom staff. These 18 cultivators did not form a circle like the black and white cultivators. Instead, they lined up under the Black Palace's step. There were more cultivators behind them? Sumo and Yi Wuhui did not say anything. Everything in front of them was enough to shock them. Ku, mi, hum, all the cultivators were chanting the incantation. Looking again, 4 cultivators slowly walked out of the Black Palace's doors. The 4 cultivators were all wearing silver robes. They shone with dazzling silver light. What shocked Sumo the most was that the 4 of them were carrying a black coffin. At that moment, Sumo could not help but frown. A coffin was an extremely sensitive existence to Sumo. The black coffin was covered with all kinds of runes, but those runes did not belong to the 3 realms. It was not a coffin from the 3 realms. Of course, it was not one of the 9 coffins either. The silver-robed cultivators were all one lifetime immortal realm cultivators, and all of them were in the late stage. They did not bow over, but they all wore silver masks. From their exposed eyes, one could see that they were extremely solemn. They carried the coffin forward, their steps steady and sonorous as they headed straight for the Desolation Lantern Array. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.